just do the little introductory thing. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Chelsea Land Use Committee. My name is Betty McIntosh, and Paul Devlin and I are co-chairs. And this is our May 2021 meeting. Per the governor's order, we have been meeting remotely, and this meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube and will be accessible later. The agenda and materials for tonight are public and can be viewed on the Community Board 4 website. I encourage you to sign up for e-blasts and get the agenda and link to documents beforehand. If this is your first time, I'm speaking really to public, not our members here, at the Community Board 4 meeting. There are three things you need to know about the process. After each presentation, first the committee will take questions and comments among members, and then members of the public, attendees, can ask questions and make comments. Then discussion goes back to the committee. Some agenda items, committee members will vote and make comments for a letter on recommending or rejecting or conditions. And third, most important, is to get your voice heard, to ask questions and give comments after each presentation. And after the committee speaks, you must press the raised hand button on your screen, which is, at least on mine, it's at the bottom. If you are calling in from your cell phone, press *9 and raise your hand, and *6 to unmute. We have a very, very full agenda tonight. We have 2 rezoning proposals and 2 Landmarks Preservation Commission applications. So are there any questions technically from the public that you need to get advice on?
Sure. We just had one written in question from Q&A from Jennifer Malachite. Jennifer, it's the first item on the agenda, which is the presentation by the Department of City Planning. The presentation will be shown shortly. The presentation itself is not in the public Dropbox. It is sent to the committee members in advance. So to answer that. And Miriam, yes, you'll be able to speak on the zoning for accessibility when we get to the public session.
So I guess without further ado, we will now hear a presentation from City Planning on the citywide hotel special special hotel permit application. So Nabilia, you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Nabila Malik. I'm a planner for Community Board 4 at the Department of City Planning. And today I have my colleague with me, Matt Petrus, who will be walking you through a presentation on our proposal for a citywide hotel special permit. And I want to let you know, some of you may know there's a lot of citywide proposals coming through city planning. And so we're trying to split these projects with the Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee as well. So for example, we presented zoning for accessibility to Clinton Hell's Kitchen, and you guys will be discussing that today. We're here talking to you about the hotel special permit. And I just want to remind everyone that this is a citywide proposal. So a lot of what you'll see applies to all boroughs and all community boards in Manhattan. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Great. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So I was just going to share a presentation, but it looks like I don't have access to it yet.
Yeah, Matt, we don't. I'll share it. I think I got it from what you guys sent out on Friday, unless it's a revised version since then.
I can send you something if you need that. We have just a map that's about Community Board 4 and the applicability there.
Understood. Okay, why don't you send it to me then?
Great. And then what's the best email to send it to?
The letter J and then my last name, BODINE at CB, like community board, .nyc.gov.
Great. All right, it's coming your way.
Thank you.
Great. I guess while you're just opening it, I can give just a brief introduction. This hotel special permit is probably the simplest of our texts that you're going to be seeing from city planning, or that you may have seen already. And so this is an application by the Department of City Planning for a zoning text amendment, and it would require that all hotels in the future to go through a special permit process, which means that it would be subject to the full Euler public review process. And so this was just referred to the board fairly recently. I believe the referral started on the 12th. And so we're hoping to receive comments from all affected boards, which would be throughout the city, by July 12th. So there's a little bit of time that you have there.
Matt, it doesn't seem to be coming through. So I'm going to give you ability to share your screen.
Oh, great.
There you go.
Okay. So we all should see the homepage here. So I'm just going to move forward. All right. So like I said, the text is fairly simple. It's creating a new framework for hotel development where those would need to go through public review. Hotels have been regulated in an inconsistent way that we've seen throughout the city. You may recall the M1 hotel special permit that we enacted 3 years ago. That's where we started to see newer hotels being built in light manufacturing districts, and there was a conflict of use there. And so that was a recent hotel special permit that was required. So before we dive into kind of the meat of what the presentation is, this is a chart and a graph that's showing what's going on in New York in tourism. So this is all prior to this past year. But from 2009, we've seen steady growth in the number of hotel rooms and room supply that have been constructed. And that's really coincided with the number of visitors that New York has had. And so we see in 2019, we had almost 70 million visitors come to our city. And then the number of rooms that are brought online is about 120,000. And so because we've seen so many folks coming in to the city for tourism, we've also seen a rapid growth of hotel throughout the city. Lots in Manhattan, most of them have been in Manhattan, but we've also seen them in the outer boroughs as well. And here's that M1 special hotel permit that I mentioned earlier, which was adopted in 2018 to really try to make sure that the consistency and the appropriateness of hotels were subject to public review. This is a map of everywhere we currently have hotel special permits. So the M1 districts are in pink. And so that's kind of has the widest extent of the special permit framework. But we also see that we've done different types of special permits for hotels. The blue areas that you see in East Harlem and in Inwood, those were to encourage residential development prior to hotels. We've tried to encourage harmonious development in Battery Park City, East Midtown, in the Garment Center. And then there's an essential character finding. All of these are really aimed to make sure that new hotels that are going in are in character with the surrounding neighborhood. This is just a map that's showing where all these hotels are being built. Obviously, most of them are within Manhattan. And so it's really just trying to make sure that we have a consistent zoning framework for the development of these new hotels. And so this slide is showing a few examples of where we've seen hotels that might be in conflict with surrounding uses. Starting in the upper left-hand corner in the C8 district, we see a hotel in the background that's immediately adjacent to a heavy manufacturing and storage use, and then across the street from a cemetery. And so this is a hotel that may not be that may not be compatible with the surrounding area. To the right, we see a hotel in Queens, where in the foreground there's the sidewalk, but then there's a bunch of curb cuts that then go into the required parking. And so that type of configuration on this lot will then create a conflict between vehicles entering to go park and pedestrians walking on the street. And so this is a type of the use of the hotel that we might have reconfigured if there were a special permit to say, well, let's try to reduce that conflict between the cars and folks that are walking around. Moving down from there, we see a hotel in a C63 district, which is in the Rockaways, which is an appropriate location for a hotel. It's right next to the beach. We want to encourage visitors to go to New York City's waterfront. But here we have a hotel that's kind of butted right up against the sidewalk. And so there's a limited amount of space where pedestrians can walk to go to that beach. And so we might see that pedestrians are then pushed into the street. And so that's something where a setback may actually make for that use to be a little bit more compatible. And then the one that's probably a little bit more familiar is the C62 District in Manhattan, where we see this hotel is set back and sunken from the street. And so it's breaking up this continuous street wall, which we sometimes strive to achieve to make sure that the neighborhood kind of has a consistent flow of the building facades. So this map, we're going to see a little bit. So this is the areas in pink are where we currently have, the areas in pink are where the special permit would apply. And so this is in all areas where hotels are allowed as of right. This includes high density commercial districts, mixed use districts, and M1 / residential districts. As you might be aware, purely residential districts do not allow hotels. And so those, we're not applying a special permit there because a hotel cannot be built there as of right anyway. And the areas in gray are areas where we're already regulating hotel development through a special permit. So all of the other special permits besides the M1 special permit are going to be absorbed under this new one. And so the Inwoods special permit for hotels, the East Harlem one, the one in Tribeca, all of those are going to be subsumed under this new special permit. But we're going to maintain the existing M1 hotel special permit because those have specific findings related to light industrial uses that we wanted to differentiate between this hotels in those areas and hotels throughout the city. So what does that mean for your community district? You can kind of see the map here. Simply put, anywhere a hotel can be built as of right today, if this were to be approved, would require a hotel special permit in the future. And so that would mean it would be subject to the full ULURP process. A lot of Community District 4 is in commercial districts already. And so those are the areas in pink that you're looking at, and you're seeing that where hotels would need to go through the special permit process. And again, the areas in white are areas where hotels are not currently allowed as of right because of their residential districts. So like the M1 hotel special permit, this proposal remains neutral on use group 5 or transient hotel use for public purposes. So this includes temporary housing for the homeless. And so this proposal is not going to require temporary housing for the homeless or shelters to require a hotel special permit. Those are going to be continued to be built on an as of right basis. Those are subject to fair share criteria as well. I just want to note here that the city is legally required to provide emergency shelter. And so that's something that we don't want to further regulate or hinder that goal. And so this proposal is not really touching that development in any way. We can come back to this slide to kind of discuss how this hotel might have changed or might have changed configuration based off of the new hotel special permit. This is a hotel that's in the Bronx, but it's very similar to those 4 hotels I discussed earlier. So I'm just gonna move on from here. Okay, so I know some folks are asking, why are we doing this now? Last year, and we're currently in a pandemic where we've seen loss of tourism, we've seen hotels shutting down. I just want to note that this proposal is not born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not in response to it. These have been conversations that we've had for years with different community boards, different communities, different groups about saying we need to regulate hotels because this is a use that's sometimes in conflict with its surrounding neighbors. But because we're currently in this pandemic and kind of witnessing a hit to the hotel industry, there are provisions that we're providing for in this special permit that allows for the recovery of that industry. And so there's three different types of those provisions, and they're really related to vesting and discontinuance. So the first is modified vesting. So these are for projects that are currently being built as of right, because hotel projects are allowed to be built as of right currently. So to allow projects that are in DOB's pipeline to advance, even if foundations are not complete by adoption. So projects that file with DOB prior to 2018 would just need to obtain a foundation permit prior to adoption. We're anticipating adoption in November of this year if the measure is approved. So that just means that projects that have papers at DOB, they just need that foundation permit prior to November, and they would still be allowed to build a hotel and would not need to seek the special permit. For projects filed between January 1st and referral, which was earlier this month, they would need to obtain a zoning plan approval. So it's less of a regulatory hurdle from DOB. That's earlier on in the construction process. So projects that then obtain that zoning plan approval would be allowed to build that hotel as of right. And then for both of these categories, each project would have 6 years instead of the standard 2 years from date of adoption to complete construction. If for some reason that hotel is not constructed within 6 years, at that 7th year or after those 6 years are up, they would need to come back for a hotel special permit. For projects that are with the City Planning Commission or at Department of City Planning or with the BSA, those ones will not require a special permit if they are approved after January 1st, 2018. And for applications that begin this, the CPC public review process or BSA or file with BSA prior to adoption, which is again in November, those will not require a special permit. So that means for projects that have a hotel component, if they certify and are referred to the public before November of this year, they will not have to seek a special permit. If they certify in December of this year and it does have a hotel component, they would need to then add that action to their suite of actions. And so the last one is related to discontinuance. So hotels that exist on the date of adoption, should they become vacant, are allowed to retain that use from 6 years of date of adoption without a special permit. So that means that if we've been seeing that hotels have been closing because of the pandemic, we want to make sure that those hotels are able to come back online if within 6 years, as we anticipate more and more tourists coming back to the city. We do anticipate that New York, we have an optimistic outlook on New York City. I hope that folks share that view too. We expect that tourists will come back. The city's going to rebound. And so we want to make sure that we have rooms for those tourists to come in. As with any land use action, we did complete environmental review. So the notice of completion for the draft environmental impact statement was issued on May 3rd, so earlier this month. It did identify a significant adverse impact with respect to the hotel and tourism industry. So this is really born out of, there's an added regulatory hurdle because of the hotel special permit process. And so by 2035, and that year is just our analysis year, that's the year that we're trying to study these impacts in, we're anticipating a shortfall of about 40,000 rooms. And so that leads to then a loss of some jobs in the tourism industry, economic output for the city. And so that's how we identified those adverse impacts related to that industry. There's no other adverse impacts identified, and any mitigation measures we're currently exploring. So that's between the draft environmental impact statement and the final environmental impact statement. So with all that, the text, it affects a lot of the actual zoning resolution because hotels are mentioned a lot in the zoning resolution, but this is kind of the crux of what we're talking about. So this bolded part at the bottom says that the commission shall find that such a hotel will not impair the future use or development of the surrounding area. And so that's the finding. If hotels, if somebody submits a hotel development and they want a special permit for it, and the commission finds that it doesn't impair future use or development of its neighbors or the surrounding area, it would be approved. Obviously, this would go to city council as well. They would have to meet the same finding. And if it doesn't, that would be disapproved. And then at the bottom, we have this kind of, you may recognize this if you are reading special permits all the time, which I'm sure all of you are. The commission may prescribe additional conditions or safeguards to minimize adverse effects on the character and surrounding area. This just means that the commission can then massage maybe the design or maybe how the uses are configured on the ground floor to make sure that the proposed hotel is in line with the surrounding neighborhood. So that's it. A pretty straightforward text, but I know there's a lot of questions, so I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you, Matt. Very good presentation. Next, we're going to go to questions, comments from committee members. So just
would you mind taking off your screen just so we can see the committee back?
Stop sharing?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Yes, that's much better. So if you have a question, use your raised hand feature if you can find it. Don't be shy. While you're waiting for your question, I wanted to ask Matt a question. Usually for special permits, there are specific findings for it, and seemed very general. And usually it's very specific about the character of the community or its proximity to residential. So I was wondering if we're missing something. Matt, Abelia, can you answer that question?
Yes, I think you cut off at the end for me, but I think it was really just about the finding being the specificity or vagueness of the findings. So this finding is intentionally broad because we felt we couldn't define what each individual neighborhood's characteristics would be. So this is going to be applying in Chelsea. This is going to be applying in Astoria, Long Island City, the Rockaways. So if we said it needs to be within 500 feet of a high density commercial district, that may not be appropriate for different areas of the city. And so this is just allowing for the public review participants to identify what is that surrounding character, and then say that whether or not this hotel is in line with that surrounding character. So the definition of neighborhood is really kind of broad because it's left up to the public reviewers to determine what that is and whether the hotel is in line with that.
Oh, that's kind of unusual, at least for special permits that I've seen here and there. And the one for the M1 2018 special permit had very specific, much more specific findings, but we won't dwell on it exactly. I see, Bert, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering from the DEIS, why such a strong adverse effect?
Yeah, so
assumptions going into, what was it, 40,000 less rooms? Or was it 40,000 less jobs?
so it's about 40,000 fewer rooms. That results in about 17,000 fewer jobs. And with that, there's a loss of wages and a loss of economic output, which we estimate to be around $9 billion in 2035. So the way that is was studied was creating a multiplier for each room. And so it says a room, kind of everything that goes into that one room is related to those folks that are visiting are going to spend at the cafes. There's going to be
Sorry to interrupt. I can understand the multiplier. Okay, if you're going to lose one room, the one room is worth
got it.
wages, and they're going to spend it, and how long they're going to stay. Yeah, but underlying all of that, what were the assumptions that because we're going to have special permits, we're going to lose 40,000 rooms that would otherwise have been built? What was the assumption under that?
Yes. So the assumption there is that if you build a hotel now, you can kind of just submit without the proposal. If the proposals doesn't happen, we would say that a hotel room can just be built going through the as-of-right process. When you add this ULURP, that adds time to the development process. So it adds, on average, we see between 18 and 24 months from when they go through that process. So it's really going to be slowing down the production of and construction of hotels. And so that's where that shortfall is met. So the demand for those rooms is not going to be able to be met by the supply because of that added regulatory hurdle.
Thank you.
That was good question, Bert. Other questions, thoughts? Paul?
Hey, Matt. In the last special zoning amendment that was made to allow to do M1 district special permitting, we as a board had taken a position against public purpose hotels being excluded from the special permit process, and that did not happen. Can you give a little bit of deeper understanding as to why that may not have happened, why that wasn't included in this zoning text amendment?
Sure. So we understand that there are concerns surrounding homeless shelters and temporary housing for the homeless, but this is something that the city is obligated and needs to provide. There's a need for that in the city. The city has to provide shelter for those that need it in an emergency setting. So that's a use that we're not seeking to add an additional regulatory approval process for. So the city needs to be nimble in being able to go through that process and being able to construct these things. And so this proposal is kind of like the M1. It's taking a hands-off approach to that specific development of hotels for that specific use.
So if we were to include language that said in a non-emergency situation, we would request a special permit for public purpose hotels. Because I understand the position that you're taking that in an emergency, the city needs to act quickly. Okay, gotcha. But in a non-emergency, we have been, and we don't oppose public purpose hotels. We just think that it should be part of there should be a community involvement in those discussions. And we have, as a board, spent a great deal of time on how to repurpose and convert distressed properties, such as hotels that are empty and vacant right now. And so we would want to have a say in how those hotels would be permitted, or in this case, not permitted if it's considered an emergency or non-emergency. So do you have any thoughts on a way that we can better position to be more effective in making sure our voice is heard in that situation?
I mean, this is why it is going through public review. So, I mean, I know that you did submit those comments for the special permit 3 years ago. I believe that there's going to be kind of the same outcome here, though, that if you do submit comments, just to be honest, this is not something that we really do want to regulate. The city needs to be nimble in providing for these things. But I do think that if there's a lot of concerns that come out of that, perhaps it's something that the city would then consider in future actions, and potentially in this one. But again, those citing of those public purpose hotels are already subject to fair share criteria and different regulations. And so this added one, it makes it more difficult to react quickly and provide shelter for those who really need it.
I just want to follow up on that. I was reading the scope of work, the draft scope of work, and on page 8, it says DCP will also evaluate whether use group 5 transient uses that are operated for public use, such as those that do not operate as commercial hotels, like emergency shelters and certain types of for-profit supportive housing should be excluded from the proposal. So it sounded like city planning might revisit this topic. And I think Paul's point was interesting because some supportive housing may not be on an emergency basis.
Yeah, so I would just say, I mean, as it's going through, it goes through public review to receive those comments. And so I think that that's a good point to make. And then if we kind of see a consistent trend of those being a concerns and that there's other reasons to regulate those uses in a certain way, then the proposal may change. They can change throughout the public review process. So I would certainly just include that in your recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who's next? Mike Noble?
Yeah, thanks, Betty. I just wanted to lend another voice here and echo what you and Paul said. You know, it's important that we get a say in this thing at the earliest possible moment, and this is where it happens. So if you could carry that back, there are lots of folks on this committee who I think believe exactly the same thing. So that's all I had to say. It's real important to us. In other words, Matt, it's real important to us.
I hear you. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, am I missing anybody? Jesse, Paul? Any other hands or questions?
From the committee, no, you're not missing anybody.
Okay.
Can I just raise one point, Betty, that I think, and
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
what Paul was alluding to too, and maybe I missed it, but I think the concern was raised in you know, in a number of times we've talked about this over the years, is the chance or what happens if a public use hotel is created or, you know, allowed, and then that usage changes later on, and who's there to enforce it, and how is it enforced, and how is there a way for that site to then be turned in any way back into a regular hotel or a long-term hotel or something like that, where we ended up it didn't end up not getting to go through the permit process that I think that the city was looking for it to do. And so that was, I think, a concern that was raised in the past.
No, thank you, Jesse. That's in our 2018 letter. And that's also that letter, if others have seen it, that we asked for a number of specific things: storage space for trash and linens, and issues of undue vehicular and pedestrian congestion, and issues about areas where M1 districts, well, this was geared towards M1, are adjacent to residential districts, and the concentration of hotels. So I just want the committee members to realize that we did opine on some of these issues in 2018 when there was a review of M1 special permit. So we may revisit them again or recycle them again.
Can I add a little bit of color to what Betty just talked about? Because Matt, I don't know if you've been in many of Nabila has heard this from us many times about hotels and any large buildings. We want trash removal, linen services, all of that incorporated into the interior space of the building, rather than having it be curbside. And seeing as it's a citywide tax amendment, it might be more challenging to do something like that. But it leads up to Betty's questions about the specificity of issues surrounding special permits, that these are the things that we in Community Board 4 would push hard for. We don't want linen deliveries and trash removal on the sidewalks anymore.
Yeah, so I think that's the type of use that that's what makes hotels unique, is because that's a service that specific use provides that might be in conflict with your pedestrians walking on the street. And so that's something that this proposal would allow for the regulation of. It may not be through a specific finding, but if it's noted that, okay, this is where we're putting the linen service in the building, and if that's going to be in conflict with the sidewalk, that's something that might be changed throughout the public review process to put it in a more appropriate location. And so that's kind of an example of one thing that might change if this were to be approved.
Thank you.
And I just quickly on the point of conversions. So going from, if somebody were to construct a public purpose hotel and then could want to convert to a full service hotel, if this were to be approved, you cannot do that as of right. You would need to seek the special permit, even if it's just for one room. So if one of those, a 300 room shelter were to be converted to just a market rate hotel room, which is an odd configuration for a building, but say that happens, that one hotel room would be subject to this proposal.
Thank you. Twee, did I see your hand up?
No,
Okay.
thank you
All
though.
right. Okay, Bert?
Yeah. Basic question, okay? I acknowledge the need to prevent, like that hotel next to the seemingly single-family home in the Bronx, or that hotel in Briarwood with the parking interfering with the street pedestrian. But we're doing this special permit all over the city. Is there another way to reach the goal without a special permit? Has that been examined?
I think, so the special permit is amongst zoning mechanisms. That's the most cumbersome, really. I mean, it goes through a full review process. If this were to be, for lack of a better word, downgraded to like a certification or an authorization where we have very specific findings, where it's not discretionary review, where it's just, they have to check the boxes, say it's, the certification provides for, the hotel can't be located within X amount of feet of a single family home, or the hotel can't have parking that's immediately adjacent to a sidewalk. If we were to take that approach, it'd be too difficult to identify all of the checkboxes for everywhere throughout the city. It's hard to think of an area where driving over a sidewalk might be appropriate. Driving over a sidewalk to get to the parking might be appropriate, but maybe that is appropriate in some area that's less industrial, less residential, maybe more industrial, that still needs some type of regional or neighborhood level hotel. So to do that, I think is too, the specificity would be too hard to identify. And so that's why we're doing a special permit, because that kind of opens it up. It makes it more of a discretionary review that then accounts for all of these different typologies that we have throughout the city.
So if this were implemented and adopted, no hotel would be built as of right. Everyone, every place, every hotel in the 5 boroughs would need a special permit.
All new ones, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm referring to, Matt. New ones, right?
Yeah, exactly.
After the 6 years, right?
Yeah, obviously besides the vesting rules and discontinuance rules, but every hotel, yeah, simply put, every hotel.
I'm just disturbed somewhat by that. Thanks.
I don't know. I having seen some of the really egregious hotels, I guess I feel more comfortable having a special permit review so that community boards can give their comments. And I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable with the very, very general, appropriate for the community umbrella, then community boards would have to get very specific on their own. But anyway, I said too much. What about the public? Do we have anyone from the public who wants to talk about this?
We have 2 people with their hands raised, so I can bring them over if you'd like.
Okay.
First is Jennifer Malacott, and the next one is Sonia.
So Jennifer?
Hi, I'm here. First of all, I'm really confused about the presentation because you didn't provide the normal documents that are in the Dropbox for what the presentation is for. And I've already asked for it, but if you can send Matt's presentation to me, I would really appreciate it because I'm very confused about this important topic of changing zoning for hotels. But
Yes.
I'm also very disturbed by the fact that you're talking about hotels rather than housing and affordable housing. And that the topic of your concern at this time is about hotels and the zoning of hotels rather than creating affordable housing for people. That's it. It's just a comment.
Okay, thank you. I do believe that our Dropbox does have the
It
slideshow.
does not have the slide presentation. I look for it. I only see the agenda, and I've done presentations at your committee, and I've had to send them to Janine to have them, and I could not look at the presentation previously.
So, yeah, no, as I explained to Jennifer before, right, the public Dropbox does not have the presentation in it. Sorry.
Oh, I see.
Does not have the presentation that we just don't have that bandwidth to hold all of our presentations. So, but I'm going to we share any presentation.
So I'm just curious, is this
Jennifer,
conversation about zoning for hotels, or is it about zoning for property, or is it about, I mean, I'm absolutely dumbfounded about your presentation, Matt.
I don't really understand your question.
You're talking about hotels, right? You're talking about zoning for hotels. You're talking about where hotels can be. What about where housing can be? And what about turning those buildings into housing and affordable housing? Because
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So this proposal is not making it any more difficult to build housing anywhere. It's not touching residential districts. Those can still produce as many units as would be allowed under the current zoning rules.
Why are you making room for more hotels when hotels are suffering right now? Like, why are you changing zoning to build more hotels when hotels are suffering right now? We don't need any more hotels. We need to place people permanently in apartments where they can live.
I'll just jump in. You make a very important statement, Jennifer. And there are a number of state and city proposals. And we've written a very long letter about converting hotels for supportive housing, affordable housing, and shelter housing. And I don't know, is our letter, Jesse, up for the public yet?
The draft was made public. I do not have a final version yet, but the public.
I mean, I'm very involved in this conversation. I understand a lot of the things that are going on. I review a lot of the documents. I'm just dumbfounded that you're talking about changing zoning for hotels rather than placing the focus on what's really important is having houses for our community, our fellow New Yorkers. Where is your priority, Matt?
I get your point, but right now this is an effort to actually have more rules for new hotels to be more consistent and appropriate to local neighborhoods. It's not really encouraging new hotels. If anything, the data seem to suggest that it will slow down hotel construction. But thank you for your point. There's another person who wants to talk?
Yeah, so Sonia has asked to raise her hand. Sonia, you can unmute yourself. Sonia, are you still with us? Okay, well, we can bring her back if she does get the ability to.
I see her name.
Yeah, she's she's muted. I can't unmute her. So she needs to unmute herself. If you're Sonia, you need to unmute yourself, or I believe you're calling in through your computer. It's just on the bottom of your of the screen there to the right on the left-hand side. But Betty, why don't you continue on with the committee discussion? And
Right.
if Sonia raises her hand,
Okay.
again, we'll bring her back over.
Okay, so I want us to just move right along because we have 3 other big proposals to discuss. So do we have some more discussion? Do you want more discussion, or are you ready to make a vote about this? Don't all jump at once. Would somebody like to make a motion? Don't overwhelm me now. I'm
Bert, what are your thoughts on this? Bert?
sharing this right now, so I'm not supposed to be making a motion. Paul?
Paul can't make a motion either.
I
He's
can't make a
No,
motion. I'm the
what do you do?
co-chair. We need a member of the committee to make a motion.
This isn't really hard, guys. Come on.
I would
Right.
make a motion if I understood what the motion is for. You really do.
Hector, what did you say?
I would make a motion, but I'd like a little clarification. What are we motioning for here?
You'd make a motion, but you're not sure what to make a motion for?
Yeah, can I,
Yes.
maybe, can I make a suggestion, Betty or Paul? Can maybe a quick summary of what the last letter we wrote on this, aimed at, and if people feel what they think about that.
Maybe we could go on the framework?
Yeah,
Okay,
if they want to add or take away anything off of that, from that
Okay.
as a base, and then we can.
okay.
That
So,
would be helpful, thank you.
so in 2018, we wrote a letter, and it was specific to M1 districts. The current proposal ahead of us here on the table is for all districts, basically, that hotels are permitted in, okay? And we raised concerns about hotel function with trash and linen, adequate adjacent parking, adjacency to residential districts. And for the M1 districts, they had specific findings, more specific than the general one that we're getting for this proposal. But we requested that the site plan incorporates elements that are necessary to address any potential conflicts between the proposed use and the adjacent uses, such as location of proposed access to the building, the building's orientation and landscaping, and storage space for trash. Next was impact on vehicular pedestrian congestion. We suggested that the use would not cause undue vehicular or pedestrian congestion on local streets or reduction in the availability of nearby parking. And then in terms of neighborhood character, we recommended that the hotel will not impair the essential character of future use or development of the surrounding area. And in areas where M1 districts are adjacent to residential, that they be compatible with the adjacent residential districts. And then we also made the point about public purpose hotels that have supportive or house or shelters, that we're concerned that although conversion of public service hotels to a transient hotel will require a special permit, the board believes it is likely that the default conclusion will be a building that operates as a public service hotel is fundamentally unsuited for any use, but as a hotel, minimizing the compatibility hurdle. Now, Matt said that would not, that they would be required to have a special permit and meet the findings. So that's a little muddy, I suppose you could say. And we also, I'm sorry, I said that the hotel would not cause undue concentration of hotels within a 500-foot radius of the proposed location. That's similar to what we all went through with converting hotels to other uses. You may recall the big monumental letter we had at the last meeting with the circles and the radiuses. That's similar to that. So what do you say, guys? Do you think we ought to kind of go on a similar approach?
Is it possible to make addition to that letter at this point?
Oh, we can have our own unique letter. And Hector, did you want to say something more about that idea?
Well, I guess my concern is that the emergency housing component for homeless. I know you touched on it in the letter. I guess clarification as to the security, maybe, on that. That there should be more enhanced security because of that. I don't know what your format
It's a little hard to hear you, Hector.
I apologize.
But I think you were saying we're not addressing homeless facilities, but I'm not sure how we would work that in, because this is a very simple
Yeah.
proposal dealing with a special permit. Negative consequences of hotels you saw on the slides. They're too close to an active industrial area, or they have a dangerous way that pedestrians would have to cross the street or go to the beach. You know, they're not well thought out. And so if there's a special permit, the idea is then the community board can raise issues about a specific hotel and ask that those issues be addressed. So that's the empowering aspect of a special permit. It has to go through ULURP and public review. So that this is something that many people have thought this is a very good idea, because then you're not up the creek with some hotel that really is inappropriate.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess a motion to have the letter supplement. I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss at how to present this as a motion.
Well,
what are we doing?
well,
Reintroducing the letter again at this point?
Well, the proposal's different than the 2018. 2018 only dealt with M1 districts. This proposal deals with all the districts that hotels are allowed in. There's C4, C6, et cetera, and they're not really tinkering with M1. So this is expanding the use of a special permit for all the places where hotels are permitted. So it's a much wider, broader proposal. So would you say, Hector, that you would feel comfortable making a motion that we kind of recycle what we said in the 2018 letter about our concerns?
Yeah, I would make a motion to reintroduce that.
Thank you, Hector. Do we have a second? Kit, thank you. And are we ready? Paul?
I'd just like to add, thank you for making the motion since I couldn't. I'd like to add to the motion, if it's acceptable, that we try to find language around emergency use for public purpose hotels, and try to get some nuance built into our recommendation that's slightly variable from 2018 to address an issue that we've been facing here in our community.
Could you reword that again? Could you repeat that?
It's to make sure that we include language about non-emergency public purpose hotels.
Okay.
The question I asked of Matt about, we understand that in an emergency situation,
okay.
Okay,
Okay, got it. Wrote it down.
thank you.
Are we ready to vote? Okay, so the vote on the table, presented by Hector, and with the addition that we include non-emergency use of public service hotels. And so everyone who's in favor of doing that, raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Do we need to have a roll call vote on this, Jesse?
No, you don't need a roll call vote on this. I just need to make, if there's someone that is voting in the negative
Okay,
or
that's here.
PD, they need to just clarify that.
So is anyone voting negative? No. Voting no. Okay. Is anyone abstaining? Bert is abstaining,
One abstention.
and I don't think there's anyone who's ineligible because they have a special interest. So then everyone else is voting positive.
Elzora's hand just went up. Elzora, what?
Oops.
I didn't have a question. That was an error. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So everybody else is in favor. Thank you very, very much, because we have a whole lot to go through tonight. So if we want to get to bed on time tonight, we need to move along. So thank you very much. And thank you, City Planning, Nabila and Matt, and we'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. And Paul's up now.
Okay, so next on our agenda is a LPC review of Starrett-Lehigh Building. And Jesse, if you want to start bringing those people over. There is a modification proposed at Starrett-Lehigh Building to modify storefronts on 12th Avenue on the northern edge of the property at the corner of 27th, just before the corner of 12th Avenue, 27th. And the second part of the application is to do some signage changing, both on the 12th Avenue side and on the West 26th Street facades. This is, as many of you know, we have a master plan for the building, so it's a request to make some changes to the master plan. Lakin, I know, are you the lead on this from your team?
Yes, thanks, Paul. I will
Welcome.
lead the presentation. Thank you. I think I see all of my team members.
I see Logan, Eric, and Ward now.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you. So I would be happy to get started. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, since we've already let that ability to happen, so why don't you go ahead, Lakin? It just makes it easier for.
No problem. Just a moment. Okay, and I think you're viewing my screen now.
We can see it, thanks.
Okay, great.
We want to do full screen.
Is that better?
That's better, thanks.
Okay. Oops, sorry, I skipped ahead here. Okay, great. I'll go ahead and get started then. Good evening, committee members. My name is Lakin Cole. I'm Historic Preservation Consultant with Higgins Quaysbarth and Partners. And I'm joined with my team today. We're Dennis with Higgins Quaysbarth, Eric Schlemus with RXR Realty, and Lok Chan as well, the building owners, and then Richard Brennan with HLW, the architects for this project. And we're here to present an application for 2 scopes of work, as mentioned, at the Starrett-Lehigh Building. And those 2 scopes of work include storefront modifications at 12th Avenue and new signage at the building. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the building, Starrett-Lehigh, located between 26th and 27th Street and 11th and 12th Avenues. It's an individual landmark and a contributor to the West Chelsea Historic District, historic industrial warehouse building designed in 1930 by Russell and Walter Corey with Yasu Matsui. Getting right into the proposed changes before you today, the first scope of work that we're looking to present is a modification to storefronts at the 12th Avenue side of the building. So this is the building and plan, and this is the area of work we're proposing on 12th Avenue. We're proposing a design that is inspired by, but that does in fact deviate in some ways from the LPC approved master plan. A little bit of background about the master plan that I just mentioned. In 2017, we came before your board and the LPC Commission and proposed a master plan that would be for the future installation of retail storefronts across the full ground floor of the building. You can see that master plan indicated on this very colorful building plan as the kind of base layer tightly tied to the outline of the building in these blue hashes, and this purple that indicates master plan storefronts that we had approved. And that master plan has been activated and in effect and partially built out on the east side of the building here on 26th Street, and then portions on 27th Street. That master plan has not been built out in other areas, for example, here on 11th Avenue and the majority of the west side of the building, because those spaces are occupied by non-retail tenants that do not use storefronts for their operation, and thus the storefront design is kind of incompatible with the current interior use. What has happened in the past with the building owner wanting to kind of improve the exterior appearance of the base, notwithstanding those existing uses, is that we have come back before your committee and the commission and asked for overlay, kind of, if you will, overlay design alterations that kind of meet at the middle of the existing conditions of the existing tenant spaces, but also kind of have a design that are inspired by the master plan. So an example you might recall of that is when we proposed decorative louvers here on 11th Avenue to cover the Con Edison vaults. That was in the spirit of and kind of overlay design to the master plan. The master plan doesn't change, but in the interim, while that tenant and operation is in use, we propose an interim design. And that's in the same vein what we are proposing tonight for 12th Avenue, an overlay storefront condition that will kind of meet some of the existing constraints of conditions, which we'll get into at 12th Avenue in this space that's occupied by Verizon, but also be inspired by the character of the design of the master plan until it can be built out later in the future. I'm going to move forward with 12th Avenue, but just before I move from this plan, I want to point out the second aspect of our proposal, which is signage. And we're proposing new building signage here on 12th Avenue, as well as to modify some previously approved signage at the marquees on 26th Street, main entrance and market entrance. So in elevation, here is the 12th Avenue elevation and the area where we're proposing storefront modifications. That's at the north half of the west facade. And then we're also proposing building signage just above the base of 12th Avenue. And then on 26th Street, we'll get into later, we're proposing modifications to marquee signage over the main entrance and at the market entrance. Keeping with 12th Avenue first, this is an existing conditions photo that illustrates the area of work, which spans from here to here, if you're following my cursor. From north to south, the conditions are an open bay, which is used for parking presently. In the center, there are non-historic circa 1986 storefronts that are locked in at the base and then have mezzanine windows at the upper level. And then moving further south towards the center, we have two masonry infilled bays, one which is not historic, also circa the 1980s. This one here, painted beige, which is CMU infill. And then we have a masonry infill that is brick and recalls actually a historic condition at this location. So a bit of kind of historic overview background, not going to go too far into the weeds here, but The character of the base of the building was historically large open bays, and that was the same at 12th Avenue. So that context is similar to what we've previously looked with you at for other areas of the building. One thing I want to point out on 12th Avenue in this plan is that historically there was an egress stair at the center of the 12th Avenue bays, and that roughly corresponds with the existing egress, or excuse me, exactly corresponds with the existing egress stair that we have there today. You can see in these 1930s historic photos, this brick infilled area that corresponds with that egress stair we just saw in plan. And the historic character to the north on 12th Avenue was open bays for trucks and trains to enter the building. Another thing of note on these historic photos is that the building did announce itself from 12th Avenue with a variety of iterations of signage on the side of the building. From this 1931 to 1932 photo, you can see those kind of signage iterations, even in that small historic time frame. And signage is part of our application, so we want to point that out to you as a precedent for our proposed design. In 1986, the building was designated as an individual landmark, and these are the conditions that existed at that time. Much like the historic, the northern two bays were open at that time. The second to the north bay, north of the egress bay, had been infilled by that time. And then what we know from DOB drawing records and LPC records is that the infill that is existing, the storefront infill existing in these two northern bays was installed somewhere around just shortly thereafter designation in 1986, approved by LPC. So these are those 1986 storefront conditions that are also the existing conditions. I mentioned earlier in the introduction about the existing tenant and the constraints of the interior that are driving this proposed design. So this space on the side of the building is operated by Verizon, the tenant, and they do not require storefronts, hence the blocking in of the existing infill on the base. Also, there was a mezzanine constructed around the mid-1980s along with this storefront design, and that you can see indicated by these windows at the upper level and this thick spandrel band that supports the mezzanine at the interior is expressing it on the exterior. Those conditions, we need to preserve to respect the tenant and its place, but we're looking to improve the appearance of this side of the building as it is a very public face of the building on the West Side Highway and Parks. So here's a comparison to get into our proposed design. First on the top, we have an existing elevation that shows you existing conditions with the open bay, the non-historic 1986 storefronts, non-historic CMU infill area, and more historic brick infill area. And this is our proposed design on the bottom. In the middle, we're showing an elevation that represents the approved master plan that, again, we're not proposing to change, but proposing to take inspiration from in the interim to install a storefront variation in the time being. And I mentioned that mezzanine that is being expressed on the exterior by these windows and this heavy spandrel. We're seeking to carry that mezzanine down and to retain it actually in the proposed design and paint it black so that it will be more in character with the appearance of the rest of the building and the storefront master plan. And then, like the master plan, in an effort to give some openness and transparency to the base at this location, we're proposing butt glazed windows with metal framing that would be by the same manufacturer as the master plan storefronts. So this variation we are proposing to infill through the extent of the north side of 12th Avenue. You can see here in the master plan design, infill through the north side of 12th Avenue was part of the proposal. So in that sense, we're kind of fulfilling it in as far as the overall amount of infill that we're proposing, but with a modified design scheme. And then this area of brick that was historically bricked in and an egress bay, we're proposing to retain, but just to face a new brick that matches the rest of the brick on the facades of the building. And then here's signage that we're proposing to sit just above the defining piers at over the base of the building. Okay, and here's a closer comparison between the storefront master plan, which is the underlying plan and could be installed in the future, and our more so interim proposed design to respect the existing conditions of this mezzanine and have a design that has the character of the master plan until it can be fulfilled. Here's two images, an existing photo and then a proposed rendering. Here we've turned the corner from 12th Avenue onto 27th Street. So that open bay, which I'll indicate here for you on the elevation, is actually here when we're looking through from 27th Street. We are not proposing any work on 27th Street. However, when we fill in the storefronts on 12th Avenue, the open, glass storefronts, the open area will be needing to be infilled at the interior. So between this existing wall and this existing pier, we're proposing to just carry the existing masonry around the corner to fill in that area that will be occupied or faced by storefronts on 12th Avenue. And perhaps you can understand that a little better as illustrated in plan with the northern open bay here. And then in this proposed plan, we'll just be constructing a masonry wall that matches the existing to turn that corner. Other existing conditions are illustrated on the top. The interior, there are interior walls behind the existing storefronts that are part of the Verizon space, and we intend to respect that tenant space and to retain those walls, installing the storefronts outboard of them. We are proposing one new interior partition at the bay that's blocked in with CMU. We're opening that up with a storefront window and would install a partition 2-foot setback from the glazing in that location. And then here's that egress bay that will retain roughly the same condition. Okay, and then here's existing plan and proposed plan. We're now at the mezzanine level of the storefronts. You can see here that this is the mezzanine condition that we're contending with in our proposed modified storefront design. It comes out to the face of the building and ties into this spandrel that is expressed on the exterior. And so our design will match that in the same sense. And then we discussed in filling the corner and a partition behind the glazing. Here in section is another illustration to help you understand what's going on between the interior and how it conflicts with the approved master plan design and why we're proposing a modification at this time. This is a typical section through a storefront with the blocked in existing storefronts at the lower level and the mezzanine windows at the top. And then here's that mezzanine that's tied into the exterior spandrel. You can see, and following this red line, it cuts right through the center of our approved master plan design, which was for taller glass windows with a louver band at the top for retail tenants. So you can see why that does not work with the present existing conditions, and we're proposing to retain that mezzanine and spandrel, but open it up a bit more with glass storefronts at the bottom and mezzanine windows at the top. Here's another section. We're now looking through the proposed entrance. The current entrance at the Con Edison storefronts is recessed. However, with our master plan design, we proposed entrances to be tight to the face of the building or in line with the storefront windows. So we'll be pulling that entrance out in the proposed design below that mezzanine level and window. And then here's a section through the brick egress bay. Again, that's a historic condition, and we're proposing to match that historic condition with new brick facing that matches the rest of the facade of the building. A storefront master plan could in the future be built out in this location according to what we had previously approved, but not necessary at this time. For signage, we are proposing new signage to sit above the base of the building on 12th Avenue to mark it from the west side, very prominent and public view shed of the building. This signage is aluminum with acrylic facing on the letters, and it would be illuminated with LEDs from within. This signage matches other signage that we have proposed at other sides of the building, the east and the south side of the building at marquees. So the typography and overall style will create a cohesive appearance and identity for the building. One thing I would like to note is that we have been working with LPC staff about the most sensitive installation of this signage. Right now, we're proposing to install pin-mounted letters onto the brick with an underlining rail to define the signage beneath. We are investigating the structural capability to be able to attach the letters actually into the rail so that they would be a lesser amount of pin mounts, but we're studying that with staff and the signage vendor. But just wanted to give you an update about that. And then here is a rendering that illustrates the proposal overall. We're looking south on 12th Avenue at the 12th Avenue facade with the new glass storefronts with metal framing and painted spandrel band, and then signage over the base. Carrying on with signage, we are proposing to also modify signage that we have already we've already had signage approved by LPC at marquee canopies on 26th Street, both at the market entrance, which is illustrated here. This is the previously approved LPC design to have a market canopy with Starrett-Lehigh Market letters residing on top of that canopy. And then we had another application before the commission where we proposed a marquee over the main entrance with numerals within the marquee over the main entrance. And here's another view of that previously approved design. We're essentially proposing to swap the signage in this design, the letters from on top of Starrett-Lehigh Market, and move them over here to the marquee over the main entrance, where we think it's more appropriate to mark the building with such prominent signage. And this is that proposed design. So moving Starrett-Lehigh Building letters on top of the main entrance marquee, and then omitting the letter signage on top of the market entry, and rather installing just smaller letters within the sides of the marquee that says market. So in elevation from the approved to the proposed, approved here, proposed here, we did not originally propose signage on top of the main entrance marquee as it was already approved to go on top of the market entrance, and think that it's a better design to have the main entrance to be the entrance that's marked more prominently. So the letters would sit on top of that marquee. And then we're proposing to retain the design of the numerals within the marquee on the sides, because as you may be aware, this is a very long block, a full block building. And so pedestrians are often approaching from the sidewalk on the side. So we think that's important to retain. And then in terms of the market, marking that market on the sides rather than on the top is the proposed design in this scheme. So LPC approved letters on top, proposed taking those off the top and putting it in the sides of the marquee. Just a reminder that this building has historically had various iterations of signage on all sides of the building. This is a historic photo from 1936 on 11th Avenue, and then another photo that I showed you earlier on 12th Avenue, signage there, and then at the center of the building on 26th Street. So we think it's historically appropriate to build on this history of signage with new signage on these sides of the building. And just so you have a sense of it comprehensively, this is the proposed design again on 26th Street, main entrance and market canopy with signage. This is LPC approved, and we're not proposing to change signage on the marquee on 11th Avenue. And then finally, the new signage we're proposing today, Starrett-Lehigh Building, to mark the 12th Avenue side of the building, as well as those storefronts. So with that, my presentation is concluded, and we look forward to your questions and comments.
Paul?
Thanks, Logan. So we'll begin, as always, with any of our committee members who have any questions. So if any committee members want to raise anything, please raise your hand. And I see a couple of hands already coming up. So let me, David, if it's all right, if I hold you off, let Hector go first. I know you're up first, but let me get to Hector and then I'll come to you and then Tui. So Hector, and Hector, if you can move close to your microphone, we have a hard time hearing you. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Hi, Lakin, how you doing? Good to see you again. Thank you for the presentation. Very colorful illustrations. I believe this had already been addressed before, and you may have mentioned it, but I don't know, there was a lot of diagrams there. On deliveries, I know there's been a constant issue in the past, obviously, with big trucks and semis making deliveries in the building. And I know the original plan had, I believe, 12th Avenue as doing something with the ramp or the entrance, the docks. It looks like in the new plans that was removed or somehow restructured. Am I missing something here, or how was that addressed?
You're correct, Hector, that we did come before you for another application for work on 12th Avenue. That was this is an existing driveway, and then there was a truck loading garage that we proposed, which you can see reflected in this rendering. And that was approved, and that has been installed. It's another one of these conditions that's dealing with the existing conditions of the building. The storefront master plan still applies in this area, but in the interim, this truck loading area garage has been installed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think yes, thank you. But I guess in addition to that question was safety when loading, when the trucks come in. Obviously, the 12th Avenue is obviously very busy, and I guess my biggest concern among other folks as well was the traffic jams and the issues of, at this point, because of the area, the area itself doesn't give way to a lot of pedestrian traffic, but that may change in the future. How are you folks addressing safety when it comes to the trucks delivering and leaving the docks, obviously? Because that was my biggest concern before.
Yeah, I think that question would be best addressed by Eric, who's here from ownership.
Yeah, so that traffic pattern has been reviewed and approved by DOT. Additionally, we do have, a person stationed on the dock that is, actively managing that. That new dock work is going into use very shortly. And there will be somebody on the dock that will be directing, folks as they enter and leave the berths there.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Hector. David?
Thanks for the presentation, Lakin. I have a question about the rendering that's up now. And it's about the part below the mezzanine. where you see actual shadows cast by the horizontal band and by the column at the corner, the mullion at the corner. You can actually read the depth, but that's just a blank wall behind it. It feels kind of strangely vacant, like it's waiting for something. Is there any other way that could be treated to add a little bit more life to the street?
Yeah, so these walls are set back 2 feet from the glazing, and they would be treated with an interior finish, and it's, you know, again, being driven by the interior design constraints. You know, as far as the treatment of those interior walls, I think we could, you know, work with the design team to have, you know, something that's, you know, maybe mitigates those shadows a little bit. But so far, this is the extent of the design.
Is there any way it could be programmed somehow? You know, maybe you could put up blown up photographs, historic photographs of the building and information about it. It just seems like kind of a lost opportunity. It seems like a natural display space.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. We'll take that into consideration.
And one other question here, it looks like the transom windows are much shorter than the ones at the bottom. But I think on the line drawing, they look like they're the same, right?
Yeah, right. So the proportions may not be the best represented by that rendering. I'd rather just take you to the elevations that, yes, they're roughly the same. And in fact, I mean, more accurate, they're matching the existing condition. So we can kind of look in section.
Okay. And the doors that swing out from the storefront system, you mentioned they're not going to be much recessed. Do you have an issue with the code requirement that they can't swing more than 18 inches over the sidewalk or over the property line?
I don't think that we do. I'm sure the architect has checked with that. Richard is on to confirm if needed, but I do want to point out that the storefronts are recessed the typical 9 inches that we have been doing with other storefronts across the master plan. So that may create some dimensional leeway with that passageway that you're commenting on.
Yeah, I would just ask you to verify that and any impact it might have on the appearance.
Right, of course.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Twee?
Yeah, I wanted to, I guess I have several. I wanted to supplement what Hector had to say. If you go to slide 13 of 35, and thanks for keeping it up, by the way, that had to do with the proposal where you said it was, yeah, that one. The proposal where you said you're going to try to fill in the gap on the left side, and that's what the right side is. This is 27th Street. What I'm really noticing though is the overhang of the van on 27th Street going in and out. And that sort of supplements what Hector has to say in terms of pedestrian and the sidewalk there, in terms of loading and unloading or even just parking. Was that something that was also part of the traffic pattern that was approved by DOT, or how does that fit in? Like, is that overhang going to happen still?
So that's an existing condition from decades ago. That's not proposed to be changed as it stands now. That is not loading on that side of the building. That is static parking. So that is for, certain tenants in the building have rights to those spots. And so that's, a drive in at 9 a.m., leave at 6 p.m. Only operation on that side of the building.
And for the loading dock part, that where this is not, that you just said, are there hours for loading? Like in terms of traffic patterns, I would think loading would be like early morning or something.
Yeah, it's kind of very carefully coordinated based on what the specific deliveries are. We're working through that plan. Over the last year, there hasn't been very good data for us to understand the necessary traffic pattern. So we're evaluating that.
Okay, and then if you could go to page 23 of 35 on the slide, I think that was where you were saying how you were proposing to move it from no, yeah, that's the right one. That's the proposal of the new signage, correct? What I
Yes.
noticed, okay, what I noticed is that it's already prominent in the cement up above. I mean, it seems a little redundant to try to have it right above the entrance and then right in the cement. I mean, couldn't it just be that you have illumination of the cement one already instead of having it duplicative?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, that there's already engraved letters higher up on the building, but this is it's a very long avenue and very kind of tight view shed as you approach the building, and having something more at eye level that marks the main entrance, we think will be, really helpful for pedestrians to find their way.
You're saying this is at eye level if you're looking across the street on 12th Avenue across where the West Side Path is. I mean, if you're right underneath it, you don't see the sign.
Right, if you're on this side of the sidewalk, but kind of from other vantage points coming down the south side of the sidewalk, or from the West Side Highway, the thought is that this is closer to eye level than this one, and will help mark which of the entrances is the main entrance of the building amongst the multiple entrances, representing different uses in this area.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Twee, that is the facade on 26th Street. That's not the facade facing 12th Avenue. So you would be across 26th Street looking at that sign, not across the avenue.
Okay, yes, that wasn't that. Thank you for clarifying, because that looks like 12th Avenue. Okay, I understand now. But I mean, that's actually narrower then. If it's now, okay, I can understand if it's so high up in a narrow 26th Street, you're not going to see it. If you're across the street on 26th Street, you'll see it on the north side of 26th Street, looking south, and that's really all you'll see it. Where you'll see it. Yeah.
I mean, we're thinking if you're on the south side of 26th Street, or immediately fronting onto the main entrance, and then in these oblique views as you're coming down the long avenue from east or west, that this would allow you to see the building entrance.
Right. So Twee, the building is, this is what you're looking at here is 26th Street. The building is on the north side of 26th Street. So you'd be standing on the south side of 26th looking across at this entrance. I know that the bearings are odd. I know.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I heard what you're saying, and I heard what Logan's saying. I know it wasn't matching, so I just wanted to connect you guys.
Thank you.
Yes, but from a practical perspective, it's just, I don't recall 26th Street being this wide. That's why it seemed a little misleading to. I mean, I thought it looked like 12th Avenue, but just from,
Yeah, I think you're responding to the rendered view, and the lanes look a little bit tighter than maybe an actual photograph would yield.
Well, let's go to page.
It is pretty tight.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, if for those who know, does Chelsea Market have the same type of lettering on top of its entrance?
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. Can we go to slide 29 of 35? I know Dave already referenced it. David already referenced it. There. Yeah. Thank you. So that's on 12th Avenue. Yes.
This is on 12th Avenue. Yes.
Okay.
This is 27th Street.
Okay. Well, one snarky comment I have is that I just didn't really appreciate the fancy red car in front as part of the rendering. That seemed to imply something. But it seemed to be the same slide as 20 of 35, so I wasn't sure why it was there again. like why it's there twice.
You're right. It's a duplicate rendering. Just, one, we were in this part of the presentation, we were presenting signage on each side of the building comprehensively, and just wanted to land here for discussion purposes about the main scope that we're presenting before you tonight, the 12th Avenue storefronts and signage.
Because when I compare this rendering against slide 6 or slide 10, those were actual photos and they show a fire hydrant in front. So it would seem as though like the blue car would be in front of a fire hydrant.
This is a rendering. It's an artistic illustration of the design to help you visualize it, but not meant to be exactly photorealistic. So perhaps we can look at elevations to be kind of slightly more accurate if this is distracting.
Yeah, I just appreciate not having cars there and having that fire hydrant there, at least for a rendering to be depicting more of what's actually there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all for me.
Thanks, Tree. We'll go to Tina and then we'll follow by Mike and then Pam. So Tina?
Okay, hi. Thanks for coming back to us and for the presentation. I have a number of questions. I'll try to go through them pretty quickly. The black cladding underneath the transoms that are currently existing, is there any reason why they're so thick?
Yes, the thickness is the thickness of the existing spandrel. So that's what we're retaining. And it's tied into some structural supports and the floor plate. So that's what's driving that part of the design. We're actually where the spandrel exists presently, we are not proposing to modify that, but rather to change the color of it so that it can be painted to match the design of other storefront infill areas of the building. And then just to kind of match that and carry that out through the extension of the storefront for cohesiveness in that proposed design.
Okay, and right below where you have the signage, there's a big black with doors and so forth. Why is that painted black?
This area?
Yeah.
This is it's an existing, I believe it's Con Edison vault space, and these are serving as louvers, and it's an existing condition that we're not proposing to change at this time.
Okay, how long is Con Ed going to be a tenant there?
I can't speak to that exactly. Eric, do you have
Are you asking, Tina, are you asking Con Ed or Verizon?
Well, in this one, it's Con Ed, right?
Eric, am I correct that these are vaults for Con Ed, or is there something else going on behind this space? I know this is not in scope.
That's a generator plant for one of our communication tenants.
Okay, excuse me.
Okay.
So I stand corrected on what's going on behind that.
Condition, yeah, it just looks. And is that an entrance there? Are there two doors that are an entrance?
So those are just access doors for maintenance.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Yeah, the large SUV also bothered me. It's not my business, I guess, where if your parking is permitted there, but I don't see why it shouldn't be, the vehicles that are parked there shouldn't be within a certain size instead of taking up the sidewalk, because also when you're going to get the traffic flow you're hoping for, it's just, I find it kind of tacky and annoying for people with baby strollers and in, wheelchairs to have to fight for the sidewalk when it's the pedestrian sidewalk. I was wondering if you might be willing to confine that to compact cars only, or not SUVs or minivans.
Yeah. There's typically not a vehicle of that size parked on that side of the building. I'm not sure why in that particular that day was, and further not sure that they were parked exactly appropriately. Those bays are not lacking appropriate depth. So something funky might have been going on that day that is atypical and not something that complies with the way we operate it.
Okay, so it's deep enough to accommodate. an
Yeah,
SUV or maybe-
it's adequately deep to accommodate, the appropriate range of vehicles.
Okay. And then facing the 26 side, if we could have that slide up, I think it might be 29. There we go. So I drove by it twice, one time last night, and I have to say I was rather, I don't know if the word horrified is too strong a word, but the LED lighting, perhaps you can point it out with your cursor, where the LED lighting coming from a high is. That light is extremely bright. Of course, because it's LED and maybe it looks to me that there was RGB, that maybe you can play with the quality or light temperature of the light, but the fact that I could see the LED lights was also problematic. It seems to me there should be a slight curtain or a cladding over it. It was odd. So if we could address that. Also, there is on the lower level of the, I guess, where the Starlight proposed sign is going, very, very bright LED lights or some kind of lighting that was just way overlit. And it was lighting, seemingly upwards as a sort of to attract attention. Could you describe the current condition of the lighting? Because I found it aesthetically displeasing.
So
go ahead, Eric.
yeah, those two columns have previously approved lighting in them. They were just replaced. They hadn't been functioning for a number of years. They were only recently turned on, so perhaps there's some fine tuning that we need to do, and we'll take a look at that. I'm not, I haven't observed the condition you're describing, but we'll take a look into it.
Yeah, what I'm describing is a whole line, not that area. And there is also a little something else going in, but that's a minor thing. Yeah, it's going across the top. For instance, it might be above the first or second floor. There's a whole strip of LED lights. And then down below on the overhang, there's another strip of a different kind of lighting. Can anybody address that?
We'll have to take a look into it. I'm not exactly sure which ones you're referring to, but we'll take a look.
Well, I'll be happy to meet you down there one evening because I don't remember that being in the scope of what was approved, and if it was, it certainly needs an adjustment. Others, I invite you to drive down 26th Street. I'm also wondering, in terms of, so we'll have that as a note to look into, why this might be an existing condition, why the overhang on the market side and the overhang on the main entry side are seemingly two different levels. It seems, yeah, what the rationale behind that is.
Yes, the main entrance marquee is slightly taller and larger than the market marquee to mark the main entrance. It's a larger span than the bays where the market marquee is located, and to just clearly define the entrance from its subordinate secondary entrances. And that is, both marquees were approved by Landmarks, and we kind of worked out those design differences with them, and so they're the existing condition, so to speak, at present.
I wish that they were, on the same level, because I think the symmetry in the entire building sort of reflects the symmetry, even these large mullions or whatever they are at the top. Everything's very symmetrical, but that's water under the bridge, I guess. Let's see what other question that I have. Oh, when I drove by the other night too, it seems that the entrance and the market, it seems that it's not as thin as I thought it would be. The overhang, I thought it might be thinner in keeping with, more of a warehouse, old-fashioned warehouse overhangs. Is there any reason why they needed to be so thick?
The design was created with the idea that it would have a kind of U-channel industrial aesthetic, and they were kind of measured and proportionate to the openings in which they cover. So, in working with the architect, those proportions worked out, and that was the design that was proposed and approved.
Right, okay. And in terms of right below the Starlight Building, again, this appears to be very nice and streamlined, but it didn't seem to quite reflect what I saw last night. Anyway, it's a done deal, but I like this rendering rather than what you actually see. I think this is sleeker and more aesthetically pleasing. And my last comment would be just in terms of the brick under the marquee in front of this taxi cab, I guess. Is that like a darker brown brick? Or is that just the way it looks in terms of it being in the shade?
Yeah, those are just some artistic effects in the rendering. These brick piers match the brick at the rest of the facade.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Mike Noble.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Going back to what David said originally as to the 12th Avenue side, putting something in there like graphics or historical photos or something would be nice. Murals would be good too. And they could be reused, I guess, if you put murals in there. I saw a great one installed recently at 50th Street, I guess, if you've seen that, the east side. And so there's a lot of places where you can, put these murals up and have them, kept for later use, different places. What's the timeline? When do you see this being used for its intended purpose? I guess that would determine how much money you want to spend on graphics and all that.
Yeah, I think so. Eric answered the first question in part, that we can look into the interior treatment of this wall, and those are all really great suggestions. The timeline for these storefronts right now, the tenant that's in this space is around 10 years at the least. So I think that the part of, the second part of that will just kind of be up to ownership about, what type of intervention would be appropriate in this interim time period for these storefronts.
Well, leaving them the way they are for another 10 years, is that what you're saying? Because in that case, you absolutely must put something there.
Right. This proposed design, that we're introducing today, we're envisioning for probably at least 10 years. So yeah, I take your suggestion that in that time frame, having something within those walls would probably be a nice idea.
Yeah. Just to clarify, Mike. So the existing condition today, we're not satisfied with it from an aesthetic perspective, which is, why we're here. We're proposing to do this kind of interim solution that breaks from the master plan to get us through the next 10 years to get something that's much better looking than the existing condition as it appears today. And then in such time that Verizon leaves the building, we would, most likely look to re-tenant this with more of a retail or amenity type use. And at that time, we would likely remove what we're looking at today and replace it with verbatim the master plan.
Okay, well, got a long way to go, so getting something in there is going to be helpful.
Yes.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Pam?
Hi, thank you. This was really an interesting presentation, and I've enjoyed it. I would like to second David's suggestion that in that those blank walls could benefit with photographs, historic photographs of the Starrett-Lehigh and its storied history. Can we go to the 26th Street elevation on the screen? Yeah, I don't remember hearing any comments about the flags that are there. I assume, I don't think they are original, and I'm just wondering, is that something that's already approved at LPC?
Yes, they're existing and were approved.
They are existing?
Yes.
Okay. So, and this kind of signage that they will have, is it going to be revolving, or is it going to be a statement of some sort that we might be interested in? What's on the flags?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so right, those are building logos for the purposes of the rendering. We are, thinking through whether there's a rotation of the American flag and the New York State flag. We haven't landed on a final decision on that front.
Oh, okay. So they're not going to be commercial. It's not going to say Verizon lives
No,
here.
no, definitely not. Definitely not. Definitely not.
That was my concern. Thank you very much.
I think that wraps up all the members. I do have a question. Lakin and I guess would be Eric. Can you explain a little bit more in detail why it is you're looking for a deviation from the master plan, which would call for double height windows facing 12th Avenue for future retail use, when you don't have a current change in tenancy? You have Verizon in there, they're staying there, they're going to be there for 10 years. And this spandrel that runs across the image of 12th Avenue is a reinforcement of the existing interior space. So can you explain a little bit more to us why you're seeking this deviation from the master plan?
Yeah, let me go, sorry, back to elevations. Actually, just kind of in section, I think this sums up, why we're seeking this deviation. One, we're trying to improve upon the existing conditions of the exterior of the building while operating within constraints of interior conditions that are related to the existing tenant. So this mezzanine and, at the exterior, the spandrel are an integral part of the operation and current use of this space at the interior. And so it is, it's kind of mission critical to the owner and tenant to be able to maintain that as part of, any improvement to this area of the building while that tenant is in place. At the time when we propose, so we're proposing a design that kind of operates around those existing conditions and then, picks up on aesthetics from the master plan. At the time that we, presented the master plan in 2017, I think a key distinction that I want to make is that, this was proposed for retail tenant use, the master plan design, envisioning large storefront windows with a band where, for example, a restaurant tenant could have louvers and ventilation, et cetera. And this is a wholly different condition that we're, dealing with the existing tenant in this location. And, true, they were the existing tenant at that time, but this is a very large building. And, at that time, we're envisioning kind of very, very far into the future for, what would be a retail operation at this location. And that can still be the case, that this master plan, and a retail use can come into play at this side of the building. But while that is not the case and there's an existing tenant with a long-term lease, this seems, we feel this is an appropriate kind of middle ground for dealing with the existing needs and also improving the appearance of the building.
Yeah, and Paul, just to reinforce, I think our motivation here is that we don't want to leave the way it looks today in place for another 10 years at minimum. We want to make that side of the building look better. Again, within the existing constraints we have with the existing tenant.
So you'd say that let's say 10 years from now, Verizon moves out, the retail tenant wants to move in, you would then remove this mezzanine level to have a double height storefront for a retailer?
Yeah, that would be the goal.
Thank you. Betty, I see your hand up. And then after Betty, if there's anybody, Betty, before you start, if there's anybody from the public who has any questions, we'll come to you next. Okay,
Yes,
thanks, Betty.
Could you go back to the slide where you have the market sign and the main entrance? I know this is probably very unrealistic, but I find that the main entrance where it says Starrett-Lehigh Building, maybe in real life when I'm out there and I look at it, it'll be easier to read. But this slide, it's very hard to see the letters with the glass windows behind them. Has anyone on your team thought about that?
I think that what you're responding to is that, again, just kind of the artistic, rendering that's not very outlined. The letters are, framed in aluminum gray, dark gray aluminum, and then they have an acrylic face. So they are kind of defined. I think maybe a better another view would show it more clearly defined.
I think what you're saying, Betty, is well noted. I think it's very difficult to get these renderings to a place where they depict 100% reality. So I think that's just a little bit of the methodology of using renderings to display these things.
Oh, I mean, I know you would want your building to be well signed.
You're 100% correct. I think the reality is that glass reads a little bit darker in real life.
Okay, I just had to say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Once again, I'll call out to the public. If anybody is interested in any comments, please raise your hand. If not, I'm going to come back to committee for discussion and vote. And I'm not seeing any. So back to committee. And what we're looking for is some sort of a position on this application to advise LPC on the reconstruction of the facade on 12th Avenue and the signage both on 12th Avenue and on West 26th Street. Anybody, and can we stop the share screen so I can see the whole panel of, thank you. Anybody have anything that they want to say? This is the strangest night tonight.
It's a very quiet group.
I thought these were all going to be highly controversial. I think I saw Bert and Pamela wave. David, there. Okay, I see a hand, David. Go ahead.
I'd make a motion to recommend approval and simply make note of things that we commented on, like the hope that space on 12th Avenue could be put to some kind of display purpose. And, I'm not sure the extent to which these other comments actually fall within the scope of what's being proposed here, but, address things like the cars sticking out on 27th Street, the lighting, the flags not being commercial. It's been stated that they won't be, but that we'd like to see these things.
Yeah, I think that, David, I think you're right, that a lot of these things aren't specifically related to this application. I think the two that I see are to request some sort of murals or historic imagery in the panels along 12th Avenue, and also that the doors on 12th Avenue don't swing more than 18 inches out. I think those are the only two that fall within this purview. But Eric and Lakin, you can see that this building is very important to our community, and every little thing that happens there, somebody has a comment and thought on. So anytime you come to us, we're going to ask you all kinds of questions. Tina, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest for the request to move the signage, if we not opine on that until we look at the current conditions, because to me, the current conditions in that area are so highly problematic. It would be remiss of me not to say something and to say that until that lighting schematic is fixed, to add even more light in that area, just, you need sunglasses. Take a walk over in the night and you'll know what I'm talking about. So I would like to postpone that until that lighting schematic is further refined if possible. Eric, maybe we can meet one evening and we can sort of talk through what the disconnect may have been between the proposed and what was actually.
I have to think about procedurally how we can do that, right? Because this is our opportunity. It goes from here to full board, then to LPC, and there's a time constraints on this. So I'm not sure how we can procedurally get that accomplished, Tina. So maybe we can find a way to think of some language you might want to put in the letter that's contingent upon light review or something. And we'll think about that for a second. Let's go to Pam, and then I might come back to you on that one.
Okay, just very quickly, I would like to see the font of the signage that's immediately above the marquee match the font of the signage that's in the stonework 2 or 3 floors above. I don't know if it's intended to. It's kind of hard to tell looking at the drawings.
Could you say that again, Pam?
I understood it. So the engraved lettering on the concrete upper levels says Starrett-Lehigh Building. You want it to be the same font as that?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It would be jarring were it not.
Yeah, I understand that request. And
Thank
like,
you.
and Eric, are you nodding and like, yeah, that seems reasonable, or are you? Lakin or Eric? Bert, did you have your hand up? No, okay.
Well, I had one thought about Tina's comment in our letter. We could say something like that the applicant has agreed to to evaluate the lighting and see if it could be adjusted, something like that. To lower so it's not so harsh.
Pam, did your hand pop back up or are you done? Yeah, no, okay. It just didn't go down yet. All right,
I didn't hear a response to my question about the font. Was there a response?
So it is intentionally different, but we can take that into advisement and take a closer look at that.
Thank you.
All right, and so Tina, we'll try to see if we can't find some way to put some language in there about addressing the lighting issues prior to installation of new lit signs. And Bart, you're muted if you're speaking to us. Now you're on.
Yeah, I'll second the motion with those friendly amendments.
Terrific, thank you for that. Procedurally, I'm glad to have somebody like you around for that.
Paul,
Jesse.
Can I just suggest that since you do have some outstanding items that maybe the added in the language that that would be for, and they can take this back, obviously, that their response would be before the vote on some of these items, if they would be comfortable with that. Just so it's not outstanding at the full board.
Oh, like for instance, oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying like we want them to explore having a historic image or a mural on the blank 12th Avenue sections. They said that they would look at it.
Well, they agreed, the applicants agreed to take a look at what Pam has suggested and what Tina suggested. And so I just,
So Lakin and Eric, are you amenable to, between now and full board meeting, giving us more concrete responses to those 3 inquiries about the font, the lighting, and the murals?
So the murals is a definite yes, that, that is part of the intention for activating those boxes. Yeah, we were on that same bandwidth as well, to effectuate that. Again, the font is intentionally different for reason, and was previously, and Lakin, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that font was approved by Landmarks at the last iteration.
Correct. The font is consistent with other signage that has already been approved.
Okay, see it. You're not willing on that one. Okay, what about the
So, and the lighting, it sounds, based on Tina's description, that there is something is off. So we will definitely correct that.
lighting to be corrected? Great. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out, Jesse. So I'll call to question then if there's no other discussion. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstention? Oh, Viren, did you oppose? Okay. Any abstentions? Tina's an abstention. Present not eligible. Very good. The motion passes. Lakin and Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As you know, this is a critical part of our community, and we love having you here all the time.
All right. Have a great night, guys.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to our next LPC application that Betty is. It's so great having a co-chair. We can share these things. So Betty will be leading the discussion on that one.
For a change of pace, we're now going to talk about an application to LPC for 430 West 22nd Street, alteration of the rear yard. And is the applicant here, Jesse?
Yes, they are. Roy, you can go ahead, or Prasanna, if you want to go ahead and share the screen at this point. We've let the rings go off on this one. So if you have your presentation is ready. We don't hear you, Ronit.
Okay.
Oh, no, we do. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, no, I just unmuted. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time to present, allowing us to present today. The project at hand that we're presenting before CB4 is for a proposed one-story rear yard addition to 430 West 22nd Street. I'd just like to let everyone know that in 2012, there was approval given at staff level by Landmarks for another rear yard addition at the same building. That was part of a CNE that Landmarks issued at staff level for some various renovations and improvements to the building. Included in that was the 2-story rear yard addition. At that time, that was the basement and first floor levels. We were not the original applicants for that. Since then, that project has been completed. A new amended C of O was issued, and Landmarks issued a NOC for that. Essentially, the proposal at this time is to do a 1-story extension on top of the previously approved and constructed extension. So in other words, what was built out in the backyard at the basement and first floor level would extend vertically 1 floor to encompass an extension at the back on the 2nd floor as well. So that's the proposal that we have. I understand from meetings and discussions that we've already had with Landmarks that while they were able to give the approval to the previous applicant in 2012 at staff level, their own rules and guidelines have changed, and hence we have the pleasure of presenting before the community board tonight. Even though this proposed extension, like the original extension, is not visible from 22nd Street or any major thoroughfare. So with that, if we can start sharing the presentation, please.
Okay, I'll do it. Never mind.
Sorry.
That's okay. Give me 1 second. Nope. Sorry, give me 1 second. No, that's not what I want you to see. All right, does everybody, I'm sorry, Ronnie, is this, you see the presentation at this point?
I can see it, but the lower half of the screen
Yeah,
is
hold on.
sort of cut off.
Here we go. Okay.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that. So this is just a quick plot plan to show everyone the orientation. The front of the building faces north. It's on the south side of West 22nd Street. And the lot itself is roughly 19 feet by a little over 93 feet deep. And the addition in the back, again, as I mentioned before, is going to be above the extension that was done in 2012, 2014, roughly when the construction started at the basement and second floor. I would also like to point out to everybody that we had to go ahead and file this with the building department at Landmark's request, just to get approval on the zoning. DOB signed off and approved the zoning last week, although the application remains disapproved because we still have to go through the community board and Landmark's process. So zoning, just so you all know, you can maximize a little over 5,000 square feet on this. The existing floor area that presently exists is 3,514 square feet. This is a two-family residence. With the one-story extension at the back, we're adding 324 square feet. So at the end of the day, this will be 3,838 square feet. So it's still considerably less than what the maximum allowable zoning floor area is of 5,352 square feet. So next slide, please, Jesse. These are photos of existing conditions. On the left is the front facade. Some point in the past, the existing stoop was removed. The alterations that were done previously under the prior LPC and DOB approval also included window replacements in the front and the back. The slide in the image in the middle shows you what the rear yard presently looks like, and you see the extension that was constructed under the prior approval. It was clad in a stucco material, and it also had a metal steel balcony with railing that went down to the garden. Essentially, what we would do is just extend that out above that level. On either side, you see photos of the buildings immediately to the west and east. So that would be 428 and 432 West 22nd, respectively. I'd like to point out sort of a unique thing with the back of the townhouses here. If you notice the window that's on the right, typically in these buildings and the ones on either side, the windows are a little bit lower. The reason for that is that the existing stair hall is in that position in the homes. So the landings at the stair are at a lower level than the actual floor of the floor that you're going up to. So the windows are lower on that side as well. Next slide, please, Jess. The block plan, this plan, and then there's a enlargement of this on the next sheet are presented to show contextually there are other homes that have rear yard extensions in the back as well that have been done over time, different periods of time. And the heights of the existing extensions vary between one-story extension, two-story, three, and they're just color-coded to give you a sense. Next one, please, Jesse. So this is just a little bit of a detail of the area on the block closer to our project site. This is keyed with the photos that accompany on subsequent sheets showing some of those extensions. Again, our building is the one that's outlined in red. Excuse me, my cat is walking in front of the camera. My apologies. She's usually not used to me being home doing these meetings from home. So, so the existing extension is in brown, with the new one will be right above that. Next slide, please, Jesse. Yeah. Since she's introducing herself, her name is Stella. So I apologize. These are some contextual photos from the roof and backyard of 430 West 22nd Street, just to give you a sense of the massing of these rear yard extensions that exist on the block. And immediately to the west, that would be 432 West 22nd Street. Their rear yard extension actually extends out almost the full depth of the lot, and there is one portion that rises at an angle. I'm not quite sure what's in there, but with skylights. So that's the immediate building to the west from the one we're working on. Next slide, please, Jesse. These are some more contextual photos of the interior of the block taken from, I forget what the address is of this, but there's a vacant lot that you can walk through and get to the middle. And a number of residents use that area to park their cars. And again, you see some of the existing rear yard extensions on both the north and south side of that block. Next slide, please, Jesse. So what we're showing here, existing and proposed, and essentially what will happen is the back of the second floor of the facade, we would take that wall out. It would have to be supported with some steel work, and the windows we're proposing to reuse. We would, however, at the second floor, rather than having the one that's not aligned because of the stair, have that line up both with the sill and lintel heights with the other two windows, because the stair wouldn't be in that part of the extension. It would be further back in the interior of the building once the layout is redone. And it's hard to make out in this render, but we would also propose to reuse the existing stone lintels and sills for the windows, and just recreate them, reposition them, sorry, in the back. In terms of finish, we're proposing to match the stucco finish of what was previously approved and constructed, just to maintain that same appearance. One thing that we're doing a little different than from what was done the first time, at present, when you walk out on the roof of the extension that was previously built, there is no parapet, and that creates potential for someone, to fall over, which is hazardous. And the owners who reside in the triplex on the top floors of this townhouse would like to use the roof of the extension once it's built as a terrace. So we're proposing to basically extend the masonry wall and the stucco finish up to the 42 inches height that you need to meet per code at a roof. So that also is proposed and shown over here. Jesse, if you're able to slide down on the, or shift up, you can see a bit more of this sort of three-dimensionally in terms of the massing, the lower half of this sheet. Yeah, there you go. So the proposed extension would actually cantilever beyond the existing steel balcony that's at the first floor. That's actually the kitchen where the balcony is. That's the kitchen of the owner's triplex. And the reason why we're cantilevering beyond the balcony is twofold. One, to create shade. The other is to insert two steel columns that we would take down below grade. The reason for those columns is the previous extension, when it was designed and constructed, we confirmed that the loading of the roof of the extension wouldn't be sufficient to take the load of the additional story on top, hence the need for the steel columns. And those columns would go to new footings below grade. We don't anticipate getting near the property line, but that's something that we would design closely with our structural engineer. And if that's the case, we are open to going into some sort of an access arrangement with the neighbors to the west. But I believe that we should be able to achieve this without having to get anywhere near their property line. Next slide, please, Jess. So again, just some rendered images of the rear facade, existing and proposed. And below that, we're showing, again, an angle from that sort of mid-block area where people park their cars, a bit of the extension that you would see from the area in the center of the block. I think the bottom of the image is cut off a little bit. Yeah. Thank you, Jess. And then the next, so these are just floor plans. So just to let everyone know, the basement or garden level of the townhouse is a one-family apartment, and the owners of the building have the 3 stories above that as a owner's triplets. So what you're looking at here is the existing garden apartment and the existing first floor. And I think the next sheet just should show the second floor and the massing of the proposed extension above the kitchen. That kitchen that's there right now is what was built out in the previous project that was extended out in the back. So essentially, the whole purpose of this is extending the bedroom, which right now is a little small, and also creating the outdoor terrace from the floor above. Next slide should show some sections existing and proposed. Oh, sorry, another elevation existing and proposed. Yeah, that's the section. So given the position of the proposed extension and the buildings on either side of it, this will not be visible from the street. And you see in the existing section on the top half of the screen, that's the previous 2-story extension at the basement and first floor level. And then the proposed one under this project cantilevering out about 4 feet beyond that, and with the terrace and the parapet above. So that's essentially what we're proposing to do. Just to point out, there are 2 existing chimneys that come up above the roof level, and that's what's shown on top. It's hard to read the note on this, the call out note on the screen, but those are 2 existing chimneys that pretty much are at the party wall parapet between the 2 buildings. So with that, if anyone has any questions, comments, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for the presentation. Lots of photos. Okay, so Chelsea Land Use members. Michael Noble.
Thanks, Betty. I've just got one comment. It's aesthetics that I'm concerned about. That extension for the 42 inches of guardrail, essentially, right, is pretty bulky. And I wonder if you guys have considered a guardrail,
Originally, we had actually proposed a steel railing similar to what was approved previously by
Right.
Landmarks at
Exactly.
the balcony. But Landmarks wasn't really feeling it, to be honest. I think that's something that we can have subsequent discussions with them. But that point is noted, and I understand where that's coming from.
Well, when you show them this, I think you will have made your argument,
Yes, yes.
right?
Mhm.
Am I to presume that that's why you did this?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Pam?
Well, don't take anything I'm about to say personally, anyone, but I find this absolutely appalling. I think it is maybe the ugliest thing I've seen in a very long time to be presented. I think there are so many reasons that this should not happen, and I hope that the Landmarks Preservation Commission agrees with me. The fact that other buildings in that block have done similar things to the back of their buildings is not an excuse for someone else doing it and extending it even further and going up even higher. This poor little building has suffered enough already. I suspect that if this structure were to be built, it would be losing the rest of the fabric of the rear of the building going up vertically up to the roof line. I don't think that it would make much sense for them to build it and retain the last little bits above. It will steal from the remaining space of the donut in the interior of the block, which is precious space. And it definitely steals from both of the buildings on either side of this one. Their second and third floors will lose whatever light they get. They will be facing a blank wall when they look out their windows, either to the left or to the right. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just appalling.
Thank you, Pam. That raises a question that Paul and I were wondering. Have you been in touch with the neighbors on either side about the proposal?
The owners of 430 West 22nd have. I understand that the building to the east, 428, actually the owner no longer lives there, and that building is on the market to sell. And the owners on the other side have been notified.
And pardon me, the owners on the other side?
Have been notified, as I've been informed.
They've been informed, but you haven't had a dialogue with them?
I have not, no.
Okay. Twee?
Yes, I wholeheartely agree with Pam. She used the adjective appalling. I was thinking of the noun eyesore, but just a couple of questions regarding the renderings. The last slide seems to suggest that it would extend the master bedroom and that the master walk-in closet would replace the existing bedroom. But the two slides before that, where you show the pink on the right, shows that both walk-in closets are also part of the extension next to the master bedroom as part of the proposed extension, and that the existing bedroom would be considered a seating area. So those seem inconsistent to me.
So the extension at the second floor, that would be the bedroom. Whether the closets remain where they presently are shown, that still needs to be worked out. This purpose of this presentation is not for the interior layout of the apartment, but yes, the bedroom that's presently there, that would function in another capacity, either as a sitting room or a salon from which you'd enter into the bedroom on one side and then the bathrooms on the opposite side.
All right. I mean, I just have to agree again with Pam. It would just, the aesthetic of the outside, whether or not it's seen from the public, is seen from the owners in that parking space, and you'll have a whole bunch of monster bulky blocks in that inner courtyard. I think that's all that I have now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tui. Do we have any other hands up? Hector,
And David Aloka.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Hector, speak very close to your.
Yes, I will speak very clearly. I feel the same way Pam and we had what they mentioned. I definitely dislike the design. It's reminiscent of a trailer park expansion when you see those pop-ups come out on the side. The windows don't even line up properly with the original aesthetic and the design of the building. Completely, it looks like it was just attached onto the side of the building without any thought of the aesthetics of it, just because it's in the back. And this leads me to another thing. As someone had mentioned earlier, this is setting the precedents that's started many years ago, unfortunately, with these similar, with this block in particular, because we've run into other buildings that have presented a land use with similar designs. It might have been, maybe my memory doesn't serve me correctly, but it might have been this building, actually. I'm not entirely sure without looking back at my records. Honestly, it sets a really bad precedence, and I really hope that someone looks at this a little more closely. I would not allow this to happen, to be honest with you. I'm dead set against it. It's basically just an increased square footage. I understand that, room square footage is a premium, and especially in Manhattan, but it has to be done tastefully and with the benefit of the community as a whole. This is just basically looking out for one single building, making it, I don't know, more profitable, more roomy, whatever the case may be. I think you folks really need to take this back and come up with a better design than this. If I had a chance to vote, I would vote against this, to be honest with you at this point. It's really a bad idea, I think. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Hector. Dave?
Yeah, what exists now and was approved at staff level earlier resembles the historic T porches that row houses in Chelsea often had, that typically extended the basement level and the first floor. So it has a bit of a precedent, and it seems like the addition cantilevering out above that is taking it one step further. It really reads as an addition on top of an addition. And we in general have been working with landmarks to try not to allow huge expansion of row houses, because it tends to invite developers from outside to buy them and simply expand them so that they can increase the square footage and flip them. And what happens is that the houses end up getting very severely altered, and they don't even retain the character defining form and the actual historic material that they're made of. So looking at this one, I realize you're inserting a beam to support the opening above the new addition, but I don't know how you would ever hold up the rest of the rear wall above that. It seems that the entire exposed rear of the building would be new construction, and if all you preserve is the street facade, then that's facadism, which we've really been making a strong case against in the community. So I guess Bert looks like he's up next.
Okay, thank you, David. Bert?
Yeah, I know we haven't yet heard from members of the community. I don't know if anyone from the community wants to speak, but in anticipation that we will or we won't, I'd like to introduce a resolution now, because I think we have a consensus.
Well,
we can put it on hold until we finish the process, but I want to have the resolution.
Okay, we have to give the public the chance to speak, and then I won't forget that you would like to make a resolution, okay?
I do it now, but go ahead.
Let's just see, maybe nobody's here to talk about it. Let's see. Or any other committee members want to comment? Okay, so are there folks who are from the public who want to speak?
We have one that raised their hand to this point. A number of folks made comments into the Q&A, but there were no questions or.
What, should we look at the Q&A, what they said? Did they, I see only one.
I'm saving that one for the
Oh, that's for the next item. Oh, okay, so that doesn't count. Okay, so there's nothing from the public. So I guess, Bert, it's your turn to make your resolution.
I think I'll leave it up to the committee chairs who are eventually going to write the letter, but I think we reject the proposal, and that would be our recommendation to landmarks, that this is basically, well, I think what was David's statement, a building on top of a building, and there's nothing left of the rear of the original. And so what we really have now is just a front on 22nd Street, and that's it. It's a huge, huge affront in the back.
I like that, a huge affront.
In the back.
I know, I'm just kidding around.
Thank you for appreciating the humor, Betty.
Okay, does anyone want to comment on Bert's proposed resolution? I would think we would. I took a lot of notes and of the reasons why people would recommend this approval. So about that it isn't tasteful, it needs a better design. It is an addition on top of addition, a huge expansion, not reflecting the historic original design. How's that? Pretty much it? Ready to vote?
I think, you know, even though the aesthetics might be changed, you know, the outlines of the building, but we're talking about a bulk. We're talking about something, an extension, really another building behind the existing building, almost to the roof line. So no matter what you do with the aesthetics, the bulk will still be there. And I think that is one of our major objectives.
We'll focus on the bulk. So is there a second to the resolution?
A second.
Seconded, Betty.
Okay, Hector seconds. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone against the resolution? Anyone abstaining?
Abstain.
Oh, Varen, you abstain, you abstain?
Actually, present, not eligible.
Oh, present but not eligible?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other, Pam, did you want to say something?
Actually, I did, but not anymore. Thank you.
Okay, so it passes. We're done. We're now done 3 items, and now we get to a 4th item. Thank you. We're moving along as well as we can. I think we're going to get some rest tonight. So Paul is going to do zoning for accessibility.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you for signing.
Have a good night. Yep.
Present.
Jesse, thanks for your help.
No problem.
Okay, so folks, we have another zoning text amendment. You know, the mayor is going through an end of term, get everything done sort of rush. We have 6 of these that we're working our way through. The hotel and special permit was just one. This is a zoning text amendment on accessibility for MTA stations. Betty and I walked around a number of the blocks here in Chelsea that would be impacted, because we were debating whether they should come before Hell's Kitchen land use or Chelsea land use. We recognize that more of Hell's Kitchen is impacted by this than we are. So at executive committee, it was decided it would go to Hell's Kitchen land use. Hell's Kitchen land use this week had a presentation from DCP on this accessibility issue. I have the slideshow here. I can go through all 37 slides very slowly and meticulously. However, I'm going to recommend that I go through them in a rapid fire sequence, and I'll stop on what I think are kind of the most important areas. And then after I show you everything, I'll tell you what some of the comments were from Hell's Kitchen, and then whatever comments you all have, we can then incorporate into the Hell's Kitchen letter. So if everybody's okay with that, I am going to share my screen. And where did I put this? Where did I put this? Hold on a second, I'm sorry. Apologies. Do you see my presentation from Department of City Planning?
No, we do not see it.
Do not see it.
Can Jesse put it up?
Yeah, Jesse, can you put it up then? And I was hoping to do it myself because I'd be able to flip through faster than Jesse.
Oh, that's hurtful. Oh, there it goes, Paul.
There it goes. Okay. All right. Zoning for accessibility. As I say, this is there are two major components of this zoning text amendment. One is to provide easements to a system-wide transit easement requirement for properties that are adjacent to MTA stations. And then the second piece is to offer expanded zoning relief to people who are out within 500 feet or 1,500 feet. I'll get into the details. Give them some zoning bonuses. So an easement, which would allow property owners to give an easement at site, and they would get some zoning relief, or a bonus zoning if they do significant improvements to a subway station in proximity to them. Just to point out some of the facts here, only 136 of the 493 subway stations have accessibility access. While there's amazing number of people who are unfortunately unable to use our system. We have one of the worst systems in the country for accessibility. There are 550,000 residents with disability, and they just have challenges getting to this. And the MTA just simply doesn't provide the funding to make the changes. So by going through a process with a zoning text amendment, we might be able to raise more funds through the private sector to get these things done, put elevators in, escalators in, switching platforms, expanding entrances. This is expanding sidewalks. All of those issues could be addressed with more private investment in this from the local landowners. You can see that this is an example of easement to align private development with station accessibility. This is one slide I want to slow down on. This shows how under current zoning, property owners could build something above a subway, but we would lose the opportunity to take some of the space for access to the subway station. So if you think about in our neighborhood, you think about 14th and 6th Avenue where the train station is and that new residential building was built. We didn't take advantage of an easement to build an elevator at that new station. If you look at 23rd and 8th Avenue where that new senior housing complex is going up, there's a CVS and a New York Sports Club on that site. This easement was not available to those developers such that they could have provided easement to that site to build better access to the 23rd and 8th Street subway entrance, and in exchange get some sort of zoning relief to either add height or change their FAR or reconfigure some things. So we have missed some opportunities because of the way the zoning is currently written. At this point, the only places that you can really apply for this zoning relief outside of certain areas is the Hudson Yards and the Midtown East Central Business District. So this is a framework that allows more opportunities to increase accessibility in the transit system. So this will expand easement requirements system-wide. It will provide zoning flexibility, and it will increase participation in the transit bonus program. This shows what they're proposing is applicable zoning districts, which would be higher density residential and commercial within 50 feet of a station. Those zoning lots would be subject to a certification from the Planning Commission to allow for zoning relief if granted the easement. This shows an example of kind of how easements could work in various locations. Again, there are 37 slides. I'm only on 14, so I'm really racing as fast as I can. If I'm going too fast, let me know. This shows another type of easement with staircases and raised platforms. This shows easements, and if you look at affected area above the easement, so somebody loses this buildable space, what kind of zoning relief can they get if that easement is taken for access to the subway station? So to address potential issues, if you take an easement, various relief can come in floor area and open space, in height and setback, in parking, which we don't worry about in this district, but it is citywide, in the use. So in a, for example, in a residential area, you could have an easement here and you could allow for some storefront adjacent to the entrance to the subway. And also some relief on streetscape requirements. So again, floor area, permitted obstructions, lot coverage issues all get addressed here. The one thing that they do have is that in the situation with a zoning relief for an easement, the maximum height increase that would be granted would be 10 feet or 1 story. So although there are other issues that go on around use, nearby uses and things like that, the height would be restricted to 1 floor. Parking spaces we don't care about. I mean, I'm not going to say that publicly. Temporary uses, how the space is used near an easement, aligning stuff. This is the slide that really kind of summarizes it. Okay, so you would, if you have your easement, you would exclude easements from zoning floor area. So if a building is building something, their FAR would not include this easement section. You could increase the height by 10 feet or 1 space. You could allow temporary uses adjacent to the easement, and there would be some changes on the streetscape. Okay, so this slide really does summarize the zoning relief for easements. I have to move my. And then there are exceptions for additional relief for specific kinds of sites. Now, moving over to the transit bonus mechanism system, this is the second part of the ZTA. If you look at this, there are places where it is applicable that if you are not on site above a subway station and you're within 500 feet in a central business district, you can apply, you can say, I will fund significant improvements to the station. I will pay for an elevator to go in. I will pay for new escalators to go in. And then you can get a transit bonus on your zoning lot within 1,500 feet if you're in a central business district, or within 500 feet if you are in just a regular commercial zone. This shows what areas, what stations would be impacted under the new system. This shows some examples of what would be used, what we considered significant improvements. This is technical language on the differences between authorization and certification if you have various presentations. This shows the expanded 500 feet from a station or 1,500 feet of a station if you're within a central business district. And then this shows again how these zoning bonuses could be applied. All right, so this is the summary. In most zoning districts, a requirement for developments on sites of at least 5,000 feet and within 50 feet of a mass transit station, zoning relief would apply. Available zoning relief for sites in less 5,000 feet conversions. Further zoning modifications would be subject to discretionary review and approvals by the chair of CPC. So this is a little bit of a sticky point, and I'll get into this one. And then the second part is the expanded transit improvement bonus program, where if you fund a significant improvement to a station, you could get a floor area bonus of up to 20% for developments in R9 and R10 density level districts. And further zoning modifications are subject to additional discretionary review and approvals. So that was everything really fast. Let me just tell you some of the issues that came up at Hell's Kitchen land use were the correlation between what they define as significant improvements and a 20% increase in FAR, and making sure that people aren't putting in the yellow bump strip across the edge of the platform and just doing that and getting a 20% FAR increase on their lot. They want to make sure that the Hudson Yards station is removed from this consideration because that's a new station. And they don't feel like Hudson Yards should qualify for any additional FAR. They want to be careful that beautification is simply not a way to achieve a bonus, but it has to be, you know, actual capacity enhancements or accessibility enhancements. Hell's Kitchen wants to make sure that we protect some of the special districts. As you know, the special district, the Clinton Special District is really kind of important to them. And that, I think, covers everything. So I am now going to figure out how to stop share. I don't know.
Paul?
Yes.
Paul?
Betty, so I see hands up though. Betty, do you want to start? Betty?
Yes, I wasn't sure if you heard me. I just, I thought it might be useful just to touch on Community Board 5 sent their reaction to this proposal. Do you think it would be useful I could give a few points that they raised?
Yeah, if you have that hand in front of you.
Yeah, I have it in front of me. They would recommend denial unless there were some kind of mandatory significant unless the station enhancements are mandatory for significant developments. And they thought there should be a density cap applied to merged lots that would benefit from this amendment to ensure that their FAR bonus is kept at an acceptable level. And the amendment does not take into account the fact that lots could be merged together to take advantage of the bonus program's mechanism to grant the bonus up to 20%.
That was one of the issues that was discussed at Hell's Kitchen, is the idea of the merging of zoning lots. So this transit bonus would be applicable to a zoning lot within 1,500 feet of a station. And if you think about Hudson Yards and you think about 1,500 feet, and then if you think about merged lots that are adjacent to that, they could be upwards of 500 feet. Like they've got a merged zoning lot that's a full block width. So you could have, the way this is currently written, an increase in FAR that is almost 4 blocks away from a subway station. And so we are looking into the terminology about merged lots versus building lots to see if we can't refine that slightly.
Okay.
Thanks. Bert?
Yeah, I would go with this. It's almost like a no-brainer with the provisions that Hell's Kitchen raised and Community Board 5. I just have one basic question. It says MTA stations. Does this include Metro North and Long Island Railroad?
It does include
specifically because the governor just announced yesterday that finally they're going ahead. It had been delayed by building 4 new stations in the East Bronx.
Yes, it does include larger transit stations. I focused on MTA stations because it's here in our neighborhood.
No, because when I hear MTA, I also hear MTA Metro North and MTA.
And it does involve any large transit station.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Tina?
So just a question out of my own ignorance in terms of what the procedure is to get these variances or bonuses. I mean, does any thing have to come back to us? Do we have an opinion, an opportunity to opine, or is this definitely an MTA? Who's supervising all of this? What agencies?
Right. There are various levels of approvals, and the involvement of the community board is not as vibrant as we would like. And it is the chair of the CPC that would make these determinations. And there are two things, there's two words of language in there. One is authorization and one is certification. And we're going to look into the way that those are approved, so that if there is something significant and there is an increase of 20% FAR, that the community board does have input on that. But I hear what you're asking, Tina. I don't know the specifics to answer your question very specifically, but it is a concern of ours that we make sure the community board is involved in major decisions that impact us that way. All right. I see Pam.
Yeah. When the developers for the as of right building on 23rd Street, that's to replace the John Q. Aylmar building on the northeast corner of 23rd and 8th. And this was a question that we put to them in our meeting with them, their presentation. Would they consider being involved in this kind of thing for the subway? Because there's one on each end of the building they're proposing to build. And they said, no, it just wasn't attractive to them. Is this something that would have made that attractive to them?
That's exactly right. Yes.
And would they have gotten another 10 feet? They've got 165 already. So would they have?
They may have gotten more bulking. They may have had more height. They may have had more variables on the setback. There are other ways that could have gone to them. But that's kind of the situation that I addressed with Tina, right? Is a building like that. We also are concerned about sort of the layering of the zoning bonus. So if you're applying for something and you're getting mandatory inclusionary housing as a component to get increased FAR, and if you can get a zoning bonus for transit improvements, and then you do not provide housing, we want to make sure that the stacking of bonuses is done appropriately. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I just wondered if this would have, I mean, it would be a great boon for the community and for Chelsea to have had that, had them build a facility there. Maybe
Yes.
at the 24th Street end would have been just great. Because Penn South is right there, and there's so many people who live there that need this kind of facility. And the other question I had was, is the builder then responsible for maintenance after the construction is done?
That's a great question. There's two pieces. One of the pieces of language that we want to incorporate, which we don't think will happen, is that the construction of the improvements need to be done by MTA employees, so they're up to code. There was some pushback from DCP on that, and that they were saying that the construction on site would be done by a developer. There would be a maintenance contract that would be handled by MTA. If, like, say an elevator comes from inside a building and then it goes down to a subway platform, you then have complications between MTA maintaining that or the developer maintaining that. So it's a very legitimate question, Pam, and something that we are pushing hard to make sure that elevators are not dependent upon private developers for maintenance and efficiency. And that they told us that depending on the location, the elevators would have to be either up to city code or state code. And that there would be a way that if the private developer was not maintaining it, it would trigger an automatic maintenance team from MTA that then would have to be funded by the developer.
So would the MTA maintenance crew do the job, but the money would come from the developer to pay for it?
Is that
a possibility?
That's the possibility, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you. David? David, you're muted.
Are there any standards for the level of access that would be provided? You know, I'm assuming this means elevators, right?
Well, this is about bringing more stations up to ADA compliance and meeting more accessibility demands. So that could be elevators, it could be escalators, it could be widening of platforms, it could be widening of sidewalks and approach to it. But there's a variety of levels, but yes, mostly I would think elevators, escalators, things like that.
Well, escalators don't work for people in wheelchairs, so.
Correct. But they do work for people with other disabilities. I mean,
okay. You know,
like I said, the rumble strips at the front of the platform, those little yellow bumps, those are there as a disability issue. And if somebody installs just a rubber strip along the edge of the platform, I don't think that's a significant improvement to allow for a 20% FAR increase, right?
So are the bonuses scaled to the level of improvement?
They are not specifically scaled. There is no grid that says, okay, if you do this, then you get that. If you do this, you get that. It is discretionary on the chair. The chair would make that determination. And that's one of our sticky points.
Yeah, I mean, regarding elevators, I think there should be a grid. And I think that if elevators are provided, you should always have two. It doesn't take that much more space to add the second one. And that redundancy makes a huge difference for reliability. And if there's a person in a wheelchair who's a daily commuter, say to work, you know, they want to be able to depend on being able to get to the subway. So
right. I would agree with you, David, but honestly, they're with these citywide ZTAs, you know, the response is we can't apply standards that work in Midtown to stations in Queens, right? And it just, I hear you and I agree with you. I'll see if I can push a little bit harder on a grid and establishing some levels at which because the question I asked DCP was, how do you define significant improvement? Right, like that's a vague term to me. So I agree, there should be some sort of systematic and objectifying list made available. Mike Noble?
Yeah, as to the grid, and I think it's always easiest to use dollar signs. Significant usually amounts to money.
Yeah, dollar signs are tough in a zoning text amendment though, because you know this is something that's going to be here for 10, 20, 30 years.
As a proportion of whatever you're doing, all right? But you've got to have something that you can key it into, otherwise nobody's going to go for it, right? Otherwise it's purely subjective, and we impose our subjectivity onto it as much as the chair would of CPC.
Yeah, I hear you. That's a good thought. That's a good thought. Let me see if I can do something with that. All right. So I know Miriam has sent us a letter on her issues around accessibility, and she's here tonight and she'd like to speak to us. So if the committee's done, I'd like to move to the public.
Moving Miriam.
And moving Miriam now. Terrific. Miriam, welcome. You can unmute. Please introduce yourself and tell us where you live and share your thoughts on this.
Am I unmuted?
You are. We can hear you now, Miriam.
Okay, I can't see myself, but that's okay. I know what I look like. I don't know and I thank Jesse Bodine for sharing that letter with you. I don't know if it was sent to the other members of the committee. I would like everyone to see it because it's a voice of the people who are directly impacted in their lives, their transportation, their ability to get to jobs, to social events like we all can without thinking about it. I am a member of the Elevator Action Group, so my knowledge is not as detailed as the presenters, but I've had many encounters and rallies, including, by the way, with Martin Treat, who I know from Disabled in Action. And I want to I tried to put this on the Q&A, but it limited my words. So I'll try to just add a few things. A member asked last Wednesday why funding is sought from private developers when the MTA should be doing this. The answer is simply because the MTA has fought elevator and accessibility funding repeatedly by lawsuits, delays, framing elevator projects as pending and future. I've seen the proposals without deadlines or accountability. Despite the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, 31 years ago, the MTA is still fighting in court for years for the determination that current subway inaccessibility is in violation of the ADA and the New York City human rights law. They're fighting it. They withdrew their staff lawyers and hired pricey new ones when the hearings weren't going in their favor. And I was there when the judge said, "Justice delayed is justice denied," quoting Martin Luther King. Approximately 500,000 people in New York City have ambulatory disabilities and about 1 million with disabilities with varying needs. We see few people in the subway with wheelchairs because of the tremendous difficulty navigating the system. Going from accessible point A to an inaccessible point B destination, such as a job, is impossible. An alternative, circuitous route must be carved out, often adding hours to the commute and complicated planning. Most of us don't have to face this, but use the most efficient, quickest route. If our train is stuck, we're mobile and can find alternatives rather than get stranded for hours. This is discriminatory, not equal access to transportation. Separate is not equal. We've all heard that. Approximately 900 elevators still need to be constructed to make the system 100% accessible, which was Byford's Andy Byford's goal. Only about 25% stations have elevators out of 472. These are different figures than including Staten Island. As I said, I'm largely involved with the Elevator Action Group. An important avenue to pursue this is the Zoning for Accessibility project, which uses developers' funds for elevator construction and frees the MTA to use the savings for more elevators. And I did put in a film, I don't know if anybody saw it, it's a 15-minute video that is very moving, and if that could be shared with committee members at some time and they have a chance to look at it, I think it would speak to the daily experiences of people with disabilities. Elevators are for people with disabilities, seniors, parents with strollers, bed, backs, and knees. That's me, an invisible disability. I always take the elevator or the escalator when it's available, or you can hear me muttering a lot of bad words if there is none. Bad backs, knees, travelers with luggage, delivery persons. The young 22-year-old mother, Malaysia Goodson, who fell and died on steep stairs at the 7th Avenue IND station in 2019, holding her baby daughter in the stroller, reminds us how vital is the need for elevators. And if I have another minute or two, I'd like to just give some very quick examples. The 23rd Street 6th Avenue subway was closed for months for repair, despite being on the same block as Sellis Manor, a residence for people with disabilities and visual impairments, but no elevator was added. There is still an ongoing lawsuit to prohibit a station closed for long periods for repair or renovation without including an elevator. This is still a lawsuit. When the L train subway on 14th Street were supposed to be closed for a lengthy period, it took a lawsuit to include an elevator on the project in 14th and 6th Avenue. Recently, the lawyer who's running for City Council in Trinity District 3 inquired why nothing was happening after many months, and MTA General Counsel Tom Quigley responded, they had forgotten the deal. Funding has to approve it. I'm so surprised he said that because it was being written up and went into AM New York. Senator Schumer stated the funding was there. He knew he had secured it. These are the problems that people who are seeking subway accessibility I've been facing for decades. And I have only been involved with that in the last few years. And it's very much something that I feel has to be addressed, and that need as a venue for getting funding for all of the elevators that could be there. This is an opportunity to pursue it. Thank you for listening.
Miriam, thank you so much for sharing that information. I think it's critical that we all hear that and are reminded of that. And I'm glad you mentioned our good colleague, Martin Treat, who at all of our meetings has always reminded us of these very important issues. And we're going to miss him sorely when he leaves us. So just for the committee now, there is no actual vote to be taken because this letter will be coming from Hell's Kitchen Land Use. But I will echo the concerns that we've expressed here, notably the zoning lot combination factor, the objectifying of some way the definition of significant improvements, and maybe attaching a dollar amount to that, and looking at the way in which these approvals come forward and how we as a community can have input. So if no one else has any more comments, I want to thank you all.
Paul,
Jesse,
just for clarity's sake and for the record, would it be all right if we did a vote on that? It's not a letter vote. It's just voting on those are the things you are going to include into the joint letter.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. Can I make that motion, or because it's not a letter? Okay, someone else has to make that motion for those 3 points for me to move forward to Hell's Kitchen Land Use.
I'll make the motion.
To vote on those 3 points.
All right, I saw Kit first and Hector second. So thank you all very much. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Any present not eligible? Very good. Thanks, Jesse. It looks unanimous. All right, so let's move on to the next item on the agenda. It's an old business. I expect it could move fairly quickly. It's more of an update. You recall at last month's meeting, we had a conversation about how we can better interact with the Landmarks Preservation Commission to make sure that our voices are heard, and that we have how to better and improve our communications with them. Pam, Betty, David, and I sat down, had a good hour-long conversation about it, came up with some very good ideas of things we can do differently, including figuring out who the staff person is that's working on these issues, the way that we write our letters and the tone and timing of them and the formatting of them. And so we have come up with some good concrete examples of what we can do to improve our possibility of getting our voices heard at LPC. There was also the recommendation at last month's meeting that we have LPC come and present to us, and that will be taking place. Jesse has suggested, and we think it's a good idea to wait. We'll have new members in June. And so we're going to see about getting somebody to come from LPC to present to this committee and have a conversation about what role does LPC play, what role does the community board play with LPC. All right, so there has been some forward motion on that, and just wanted to thank everybody for all that contribution so far. Twee.
Yeah, and instead of just making it for Chelsea land use, I know that there's always been those informative type of seminars that CB4 puts out. Is this something that could be for everybody, so that everybody can know what LPC does, in case other people are interested, either to be, in the public when we do Chelsea land use, or whenever it comes to general board for wider distribution?
Yes, that's a great suggestion, Twee, and one that we also discussed between Pam, Betty, and myself, that we would think about actually inviting other community boards, as not just our full board, but other community boards to come to it, boards that have active landmarks preservation committees, and have them participate as well. So I think Mike was next, then Pam.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how we go about this, since the last time it was brought up. And, it seems to me that we can do things without anyone else's help. Maybe a different approach is something that might work. All of our letters, regardless of what agency they go to, what elected official they all start out with the boilerplate, this many people voted this way, that committee, all that business, okay? My simple recommendation is, very first paragraph is a sentence long that says, boom, either agree.
Mike, you're singing, you're preaching to the choir here.
Well, am I now?
You are.
You're the guy who's writing these letters, okay? Am I doing it? Listen, we've got to make some headway. One sentence, boom, boilerplate. That's what our boilerplate is, a statement of what our position is. And that's it. Okay, if they want to read on, fine.
Right, Mike, we are 100% with you on this. So our new Chelsea Land Use Committee letters to LPC will involve the boilerplate at the very first paragraph, because we're not going to take that fight on. But then the very first sentence after the meeting dates and the vote count, the very first sentence will be a summary statement of the position we're taking. Straightforward, to the point, nothing else. And then after that, we'll move to background, project history, reasoning why, and doing all that. But that's something that Betty and I have agreed to reformat the Chelsea land use letters, and it was because of David and Pam saying what you're saying. We're in agreement.
Well,
we might make it in bold.
Betty, we're almost in agreement. Put the sentence first and all the boilerplate second.
All right.
Why not?
We do not have the authority to change the community board's template. I'm not, we're gonna take incremental steps in making that change, Mike.
We got a problem child we're dealing with here, okay?
Right. Well,
we're gonna stop at our boilerplate and go no further. Anyway, okay.
Right. Thank you, Mike. Pam?
Yeah, Mike, thank you for your passion on that topic. I quite agree with you. I understand there are all sorts of reasons not to do that, but it was my first lecture from Ed Kirkland, whom I think you remember, was exactly that. If you're going to be writing letters to LPC, say up front in your first paragraph everything that you want to say, and then elaborate on it afterwards, and then maybe restate it at the end of the letter. But, and Paul and Betty, thank you so much for having the heart to pursue this. I really appreciate it. I'm sure David does too.
We want to see more success. Hey guys, one thing I forgot, I wanted to mention this on the zoning for accessibility, because of Miriam's presentation, and Betty mentioned the Community Board 5 letter was a deny unless situation. I think that our position should be we support any efforts to increase accessibility, and this zoning text amendment would promote positive changes. And is everybody okay if I push for that sort of language rather than a deny unless language?
Yeah, much better. Yes, much better.
Yeah.
We don't have to do a formal re-proposal or motion about that?
Okay.
Yeah, just leave all the deny unless to the business license and permits committee.
Yeah, right. That's
here. We're here.
Okay. All right. Anything else on LPC, old business? And then I have one other item. Jesse, I didn't think. I'm thinking of it now, seeing Kit's face on here. Is that there are planning fellowship programs that come through every year for us. Hell's Kitchen Land Use is applying for a planning fellow to look at use of laundry facility, like moving laundry and linen inside of buildings and trash inside of buildings as opposed to having it on the sidewalks. And they're going to be reviewing that. At our conversation on conversion of distressed hotels and commercial space, Kit had brought up an idea of examining other cities and states and countries that have done conversions in the past and see what models they have, so that if we can make a recommendation to the city and to the state of other models, that it would behoove us to look at those as opposed to trying to recreate the wheel. So Kit and Varen and Betty and I are working on a proposal to see if we can get a planning fellow to do that investigation for the board. All right.
There's a quick update on that. The deadline has been extended to June 1st for the application, so we have a little more time.
Right. I'm still, and I've talked to Kit and Betty and Varen about this, that still pushing for exec committee to have it done by then.
Oh no, I agree. I'm just saying the deadline.
Then just let it get it done.
Yeah.
Have at least have a draft done.
I would also, and I think Paul, you attended this event last week, put on, sponsored by Gail's office, and then a couple other project
I went to
renewals.
that too.
Yeah, I thought that presentation from his name is escaping me. He sort of was the moderator at the
John
beginning.
Mudd.
I'm sorry?
John Mudd.
No.
No,
The gentleman
no.
after him, Ted. Begins with,
The guy from Project Renewal?
no, it's a different organization. He did the presentation and he sort of actually touched on a lot of he gave a lot of examples of other programs in other cities and areas. And so he's actually presenting at Housing this week on Thursday nights.
Oh.
Just anybody that's interested or is working on that, I would recommend maybe jumping on Housing just to see that. It's the second item after DHS, and I don't know how long DHS will take, but
Yeah.
So.
And then one final thing, I'll just remind everybody that that the Empire Station Complex ESD has expanded the Community Advisory Committee. There are now 4 members from Community Board 4 on that committee. I'm representing land use. Christine is representing transportation issues. And then Jeffrey LaFrancois is first vice chair and Lola is chair. So the 4 of us are on weekly meetings, theme-based. Every week there's a different topic we go through. Tomorrow's topic is on through running of trains underneath, above, beside Penn Station. So we're getting into some real big weeds on that stuff.
Is that running of trains from Penn Station to Grand Central, or just through running New Jersey to Long Island?
Yes. So the current through running only, Amtrak is really the only truly through running network, right? And so we want to look at New Jersey Transit and LIRR and see if they can, because right now they come into Penn Station and then they go back out. And if the theory is if they could go cross through, we might be able to get more capacity. The current statement is that through running does not increase capacity. But I just looked at the reasoning why they have it is because they want to make the platforms wider to accommodate ADA compliance. And if they do that with through running, they won't have the space for as many trains. So it's sort of a convoluted logic that they're using on that. We also need to connect, there's the new Gateway Tunnel coming in from the south, and they're going to close the North River Tunnel while they repair the North River Tunnel. So even after Gateway Tunnel is built, those two tracks, is one coming in and one going out across the Hudson. That will remain until the North Tunnel is repaired, and then they'll have 2 tracks coming in and 2 tracks going out, and that's all they'll have. So the current thought is the southern trains would be New Jersey Transit trains that would come in at a terminus at Penn Station and not continue onward to the East River. Lots of stuff on the Empire Station Complex website if you want to dig deeper.
Jennifer Malacott from the Q&A helped me remind myself here. It's Ted Houghton from Gateway will be presenting on at Housing. So.
Oh, terrific. Thanks, Jennifer. Great.
So,
okay, guys.
So does that mean?
Hold on, Pam, go ahead.
Yeah, that means the end of 30th Street, the north side of 30th Street, with the through tracks expanding on both sides. That's kind of the death knell for all those buildings on 30th Street.
That's the southern expansion, what you're referring to.
That's what I'm, yes.
Right.
I'm sorry,
The southern expansion is still the current proposal. There are alternatives to have tracks go underneath and create a 4th level below Penn Station, the southern expansion or the northern expansion. And right now, all, what's that black 8 ball? All signify southern expansion. So now whether we also raise that block or not is still, all these, everything is being discussed is the point. Like we're going through every single issue.
It will just be tragic to lose that church.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to happen.
And there will be a series of public meetings on this, right? Like we will have opportunity to have much more input on this.
Good.
The pre-gateway proposal, the ARC proposal, was a deep tunnel. It wasn't a cut, it was a deep, deep tunnel.
Correct. But there are issues with grading and how you get up to Penn Station, and long trains with small engines can't make the more than a 5% grade increase over a distance of space. I was like, can't we just get the book called The Little Engine That Could and just get them going?
Oh dear.
So anyway, but I just want to let you all know that that is still ongoing, that we are in very deep, detailed conversations, and that this community board has 4. I mean, I just named the 4 of us. Do you think any of us are quiet?
No.
So I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yes.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your patience for the long meeting tonight.
Thank you all. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good work.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.